hey. Inner belt. I don't think we do. Well, yeah, we do. Ginger, yes, we do.
Thanks for your patience, everyone. We'll get started here in just a moment.
Are we okay?
Ready when you are, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll begin the Planning Committee meeting of Akron City Council. I'd like to ask for a roll call from our clerk, Sarah Biviano, please.
Fusco,
Aye.
Kamer, Connor,
Aye.
Baylor,
Aye.
Mosley.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
Thank you. We do not have any items that's up for a public hearing today, although we did have a request from the administration for a presentation this afternoon. And so I'm going to turn it over to the head of OID, Mr. Volleman, for an introduction here.
Yes, hi, and I see that Liz is online. As you know, we've spent a little over 2 years working on putting together a report on the Interbelt and its history, the present and future recommendations for the use of the Interbelt and potential development of the Interbelt. Liz Agbu, who I believe many of you met, I think, has she been here before in person, I believe. Studio O has been our consultant that has put this together, this report together for us, and we're at the point where we are releasing it to the public, and we'd like her to say a few words.
Well, thank you very much for presenting to council. Welcome. Welcome, Liz. We had a nice long conversation a while back. Enjoyed that in all of your work. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, and thank you for welcoming me back. I believe I last presented to you all in May 2022 when I was about to launch the community engagement efforts in support of this project. And so, as Sean mentioned, my report was just released a couple hours ago. It's now available online. And so what I was hoping to do today is walk you through some pieces of it, share some of the recommendations, just give you a sense of the look and feel of it. And then I am happy to answer any questions that you might have. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. So as I think I might have shared when I was last here, the advisory group, which was a thing I used in my process, it was made up of community members that kind of cut across a bunch of different constituencies, including about half representation of former residents. And they were the ones who named this initiative of reconnecting our community as a community engaged effort to reckon with the Interbelt's past and start to imagine what a healed future might look like. So that's where this name comes from. For the report, there are actually two different pieces. There is a full 90+ paged report that is available if you really want to nerd out on all the details. It's partly that large, about half of it is actually an appendix. It's created that way in part because knowing that we're about to go through some transitions within the city, and we really wanted to make sure that all the information was in there. And from my experience of doing community engagement in many different communities, one of the things that people really want is some transparency about what you've learned, what is the data that you're making your recommendations from. And so we wanted to provide this so that if people wanted to go into further detail of some of the things that informed the main parts of the report, that they would be able to do so. However, understanding that not everybody wants to go through a 90-page report, there is also a shorter 24-page executive summary that is available. Both of these are available on the now revamped Akron Interbelt website. We've really kind of tried to change up the design to make it even more accessible, to front load the idea that we're really starting to lead with stories. And you will see that there is now a new page that has been created where people can access both the executive summary and the full report. This is a page from inside both the full report and executive summary, and I think it really speaks to one of the main pieces that drove a lot of the work that I did. in that it is really important to make sure that we're grounding it in stories. And so I think I might have mentioned when I was last here that for me, I often look for who is the community that has been most impacted by the actions of the past. And it is not to say that my process is not inclusive in talking to everyone, but it really puts an extra emphasis in making sure that we're talking to those who are most impacted, because they should determine the lead of how we think about moving forward. So the tenor of this report, it's both my analysis and recommendations, but when you go through it, you will see that it is really leading with letting the stories tell the story of what happened and how people feel. And that's also hopefully to, as the report gets socialized within the larger Akron community, that it's not just the story of those who were displaced or those who were impacted in the neighborhoods adjacent. It's actually the story of all of Akron. And so by front loading stories, I'm really hoping that it can create a landing place for people to enter into that. When you go into the full report, you'll see there's an introduction telling the history. I think one of the things that I found is telling the history. I think one of the things that I found as I went through this work is that when we looked at the kind of broader Akron community, that not everybody knew the full history of the neighborhood that preceded the Innerbelt. And then I go into a summary of my engagement. I talk about the different engagement activities that we did, what we heard, key takeaways, and then go into recommendations, both short-term and long-term. And then, as I mentioned, the second half of the report is really the appendix. There's acknowledgements, listing of advisory group members, a pretty high-level recommendation implementation matrix, a glossary of terms, which was one of the things that the advisory group recommended when they read the draft. They felt it was important to help people, help the material be even more accessible. Description of engagement activity types, which is intended to kind of set forth a resource for future groups that are doing this work. Some context maps, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a minute. Engagement data analysis. So there were really two types of data that collected. Qualitative, which was often the one that was used primarily with former residents and other communities that were most impacted. And then a more quantitative research that kind of covered a lot of the stuff that was done with the broader Akron community. And so we've kind of put the data sets in the appendix for people to access. And then something that was asked for quite a bit by the advisory group and others that I talked to is having precedents. What's happening in other communities? How does that connect to stuff that might be done in Akron? We've woven in some of the precedents in the recommendations, but then there were some that we did not fit in there. And so those are also available in the appendix, because this is a lot to go through. When you go through the actual full report, all of these things are hyperlinked. So if you just want to jump straight to the recommendations, you can do that. Or if you want to jump to the appendix and go to acknowledgements and whatever, you're able to do that as well. I'm just going to show some clips from some of the pages within the report just to give you a sense of how it feels. I'll stop at a couple key places where it relates to specific analysis and recommendations. So there's a history section, as I said, to kind of create a common understanding of the history of the neighborhood that preceded the Innerbelt and how the Innerbelt came to be. This I like because it also gives you a tenor of this idea of continuing to use stories and quotes throughout, as well as images. Really the effort with the design of this report was to try and make it as accessible as possible. And then when we get into the summary of engagement section, really try to lay out what our process has been so that people can really track how we got to where we got to. We also detail the types of engagement that we did and the numbers of folks that we reached. So, I got to know several of you from going to your ward meetings. We were able to do 5 of those. We also had 13 focus groups with former residents and other impacted constituencies. We did 18 engagement stations at events around Akron. We have 25 oral history interviews that are currently up on the history archive that we set up with Summit Memory. When we launched a survey earlier this year, we had over 600 participants in it, both in a digital and paper survey. And as of August, there were over 8,400 visitors to the project website. This gives a little bit of a sense of who we've talked to. as I said, this comes from a lot of the quantitative data as opposed to the qualitative data. But as you can see, majority of folks we engaged were within Akron. There was sort of distribution across all neighborhoods, with West Akron being the highest one in which we engaged. I'm pulling this from the appendix, but I wanted to show it. One of the things that we found very early on, especially amongst former residents, is that they felt that the history of the neighborhood had really been erased. And so an initiative that we launched in addition to the oral histories was to actually try to recreate the map of the old neighborhood. So we worked with staff in the planning department to kind of create a baseline map. And then this map, or these two maps, are actually maps that we took to many of our engagement events over the last year and a half, and actually got former residents to start to populate things. So like Sparkle Market, Margie's, anywhere that they felt, the custard stand, anywhere that they felt of significance got populated. And then we were able to get Mike Meyer, who we were working with at the planning department, to sort of update the map. And so my hope is that this continues to be updated so that we really have a more complete record of what this neighborhood looked like before the Interbelt came through. In the engagement section, one of the things I do before I get to what my key takeaways are is really just summarize the things that I heard. And they fall across a bunch of different categories. What you see on the screen now are just two of them in terms of the neighborhood memories and the surrounding neighborhoods. And I largely did this because I have found in the processes that I do, it's really important at key milestones within the engagement process for people to feel like they can have the words that they said reflected back to them so that they know that you heard what they said. And so I wanted to do this as kind of a grounding before getting into the key takeaways and recommendations. Couple more topics that people had, what their visions for the future were. In our surveying, we asked people what they would like to see on the Interbelt. I just flagged this in part to say that, even though food uses got the most number of votes, I would say in general, in my conversations with people, there wasn't any use that far and away was like, the Interbelt must definitely be this. And as you can see, you have a pretty good representation across all of these numbers. I think we should just be mindful of the fact that the Interbelt is 30 acres, which is basically the equivalent of a new neighborhood. And so many of these uses and the diversity of uses actually represent the diversity of uses that you would find in a neighborhood. In terms of things that people don't want to see, I would say it was kind of all over the map. But I think there was a real desire not to see industrial uses, retail, mall. I heard a lot that people did not want to see, although I would actually say youth did kind of express a desire for shopping. And I think, as you can see, there's still some more work to identify the things that shouldn't go on the Interbelt. So this is actually from the executive summary, but I just wanted to highlight it because it just gives the top level of what my key takeaways were, just based on all the things that I heard. So I would say that it is critical to acknowledge and provide resources to support people's grief. I think one of the things that I found is that a lot of people, both within and outside of the Black community, had not talked about what had happened, even though it's been 50 years. And so holding this conversation actually was sort of also opening up people's grief. And I think that process of helping people process and move through it still needs to continue. I think there's more work that's needed to socialize the Interbelt's past. I think definitely by the end of this stage of the process, felt like more people knew what had happened, but there's still not a lot. And I think if you're trying to get a common understanding of what direction things should move forward in, it's really helpful that we have as many people as possible who are working from the same starting point. And to connect it to that, fully accounting for the past is seen as an essential part of moving forward. I think because in part that things had not been talked about, I also think there were sort of incomplete records of that past, that people felt it was hard to articulate a future if we didn't actually know for sure all that had happened in the past. And you'll see in the recommendations that I have some things that relate to that. The harm is generational, and so the healing must be too. I think it can be easy to say, well, this happened 50 years ago. The folks for whom there's either an apology or redress are those who were directly impacted through the displacement or the loss of their neighborhood. And the reality is that that what happened 50 years ago had a cascading impact, whether it's around generational wealth, loss of generational wealth, or even, as I mentioned, about the people's grief, or as I talked to people who were displaced, quite a few of them said, actually, what our concern is for those who are left behind. If your home was not needed for the inner belt, you still experienced the loss of your neighborhood, dead-end streets, a drop in property values, a loss of your commercial street, and wanting to know what was done with them. And so really there's been a generational impact. And so we have to operate with that frame when we're talking about how do we redress this. The loss of the neighborhood deeply intersects with the loss of belonging. So in conversations with former residents, one of the things that in their description of the old neighborhood, it was really a place where they felt like they belonged, they felt like they were seen, they felt supported. And many of them report that like when they moved after they were displaced, it was hard for them to find another neighborhood that offered that same thing. And so I think that's just a loss that we need to honor. Creating an inclusive neighborhood means being intentional and explicit about belonging. So I think as conversations continue about what does redevelopment look like, we shouldn't just say that, well, if we build this mix of things, it'll be open to everyone, and that's what inclusivity is. I think we have to really be explicit about what do certain constituencies need in order to feel like they belong. Let shared values and equitable outcomes drive the conversation on use. Connected to that, I think people really wanted to understand what are the values that will govern development and how can we make sure that development is as equitable as possible. The city needs to be more vocal about its stance on the inner belt. So I think some of this relates to the fact that the vacation of the highway, at least the portion that is permanently closed, occurred in 2016. My work did not begin until 2020. And so I think even though the hiring of me represented a city stance of sorts, I think people just needed to hear more language from the city in terms of what its thoughts were about the inner belt, what its plans were, et cetera. Community engagement requires moving at the speed of trust. I would say this process has lasted longer than I thought it would, but I also think that was what was needed to build trust within the community. I definitely wouldn't say at this point that I feel like I've totally gotten all the trust that can possibly be gotten, but I think we're in a better place than we were when I started in 2020. And I think as we talk about moving into a master plan for this site, that how to support that trust and how to let that govern some of the decisions in the process as opposed to just artificial deadlines is really important. And then community engagement also requires being mindful of context and nimble in approach. So, one of the things I would say is like, I definitely started off with a plan of what I thought community engagement would be like. But then as we saw who we were engaging and who we were missing, we had to adjust. And so it's really important for any future engagement to really operate with that and not just say, we have a plan, this is what we're following, but actually adjust as needed. And then just to say, the executive summary will have these highlights. And then if you really wanted to see in detail what's happening, you could go into the full report and you would get basically the color commentary that I just offered up now. In addition to those key takeaways, I also offer up recommendations for action, both short and long term. You'll notice there's a little bit of a gap here in terms of the medium term, and that's really because I think there's a lot of stuff that is still in play. And so I basically recommend that over the next 3 years that there starts to be some milestones that are set up for what would happen in this period. The recommendations are really oriented around supporting, engaging in further healing and reparative efforts. So you'll notice even from the way that I've talked about the stuff to date, my recommendations aren't just in terms of what should happen with the physical site, but also I think there's a whole host of programs that would really support this to be a deeply community engaged and healing process. And so I offer up recommendations for that as well. I also think in this time, developing relevant strategies, policies, and partnerships is important, as is, of course, seeking funding. We know that the city won a federal Reconnecting Communities grant that's supposed to fund the master plan. And so the recommendations are really oriented to also support whatever team comes in to run that effort. And then finally, creating implementation and accountability frameworks. I think one of the things that I heard from quite a few constituencies is really wanting to know how they could hold this process accountable as it moves forward. And so there are some recommendations related to that. These are from the executive summary, just a quick distillation. As you can see, there are 4 or 5 categories that are set up for those recommendations for the short term, and then 4 for the long term. And there's a host of things within each. So everything from recommending that there's an apology from the city for what was done, to hiring a master plan team with deep engagement capacity, developing an interim use strategy. That's really around the fact that this, shovels aren't going to hit the ground for another 6, 7 years. And you have that land vacant now. And I think it's a really important way to both start to turn it into community benefit earlier rather than later, and create some productive use. Also, talk about leveraging the site to share the history, and then of course releasing the RFQ, and there's some recommendations around what should be in that. In terms of long-term recommendations, I really think there's an opportunity to create a community land trust as well as a community restoration fund. Bring back Worcester Avenue might sound a little bit odd, but honestly, it's actually something I've heard from quite a few people of what would a commercial district that really centered Black businesses look like. Again, accountability, bringing a long-term accountability structure, thinking about this as a neighborhood, not just a singular use. I also think it's really important to understand that, there's an opportunity for this, what happens here, to be a bridge. And so between West Akron and downtown. And so the goal is not to to create something that competes with either neighborhood, but actually complementary and stitches them. So working with that together. I think there's an opportunity to create an African-American cultural district. Again, not as a thing that would gouge anything that's happening in West Akron, but a way to sort of marshal resources. In terms of physical site, it seems like filling in or putting a land bridge, at least on some of it, is important to start to restore the street grid. There's some surrounding roadways that exist a little bit like mini highways on either side, and I think that needs to be rectified in some way. And then you can see there are a couple other recommendations as well. In the full report, you'll get a more detailed description of these recommendations, as well as some of those precedents that I mentioned. I want to note that in the press release that the city issued today to accompany my report, that the Mayor Horgan did issue an apology on behalf of the city. This example from Knoxville, I think, is really interesting because it talked about apology both being from the mayor and also in the form of talking about how are you supporting efforts to do some continued healing and restoration. As you can see, there's also some stuff that with the physical site and precedents that help connect to that. I would say with the precedents, they're offered up both as, here are some examples that may be great for the city to follow, but also maybe here are some things to be mindful of. So there's a little of both within the precedents that are created. Going to the appendix, there's very high level implementation matrix for all of the categories and all of the recommendations that are listed in the report. And then, as I noted, there's more case studies that are covered. And the case studies were really chosen based on what I heard from people wanting to see more examples around. And then, as I noted earlier in the appendix, there's also the data sets from all the surveys that we collected. Again, it's mostly speaking to the quantitative data. And then finally, for next steps, so today, this report is released online. I'll be in town later this week to do some engagement events. Members of the broader engagement team will be doing engagement this week and next. I will be meeting with Mayor Horgan when I'm in town later this week, and then connecting virtually with Mayor-elect Malik in 2 weeks. Right now, the planning department is estimating that the master plan RFQ will be released in Q1 of 2024. And then we're continuing to funnel resources to continue to build the history archive. I think it's really important given that so many of the folks who were displaced or left behind are elders. And so it's really important to capture as much of those stories now as we can. And then a couple of related activities that I think are connected to this work. The downtown plan update, which I've actually separately been involved with, particularly helping to think through some of the equity issues. It's coming out this month. The West Akron plan is going to be released early next year. And again, I think it's really important to hold both of those because I think really taking a district approach to how we think about what happens on the Innerbelt is important to make sure that you're actually lifting all boats instead of trying to develop the Innerbelt at a way that is at the expense of these two surrounding neighborhoods. And then the final piece that I will say is that it really feels like there's some emerging communities of practice around how to do this work. So just last week, Knight Foundation and Bloomberg Center for the Cities held an Infrastructure Innovation Summit in DC. I know that Kyle Kudachef from Knight brought a contingent from Akron, and it was a really great opportunity in which to engage with other cities and learn some best practices. Reconnecting Community Summit, there's a group, one of the other grantees in St. Paul, who won a $2 million planning grant, has been really great in terms of leading the charge to talk about how these different cities are sharing information so that everybody can do better. And so they held a conference last month or 2 months ago in October. I was a keynote speaker for it, and Dylan Garatano from the planning department, who was the one assigned to this project, attended as well. They're planning their next conference in September 2024. And then also in between now and then, they're planning to have some practice webinars in early next year, which I hope that the planning department can continue to engage with. So that was a mouthful. I'll stop. I'm happy to answer any questions if there's time.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Certainly appreciate it. I will, and all of your hard work. I'm looking forward to seeing this report. Is there any committee members with any questions or comments at this time? Any committee members? Committee members, no? Any council members with any questions or comments at this time? Oh, Mr. Neal's hand is up, and so is Linda Mobian's. We'll see Mr. Neal first.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Liz, good to see you again. Thank you for the way you've engaged the community and for your work. I appreciate it. The Community Restoration Fund is critical to the sincerity of this work. Do you lay out a blueprint on how to establish that fund and how it should be housed? That'd be my first question.
Yeah, so I do not lay out a blueprint because I actually think there's some work to figure out what's the best way to do it. But I offer up some examples of where, one thing you could do is just say, once redevelopment comes, you could take a percentage of the developer fee, sort of modeled like the 1% for the art program, where you take 1% and plug it into an art fund. And I know that the city just launched their 1% for the art program or policy in 2020. So you could do something like that. But I think there's really some work that needs to be done to figure out where is the best way to house it. And I would also say that I think in general, what is the overarching structure of who is managing the redevelopment process is something that needs to be developed within the master plan process. So I actually make a recommendation that get included as part of that work.
Okay. I'd like just for it to be a part of record here during this meeting, a gentleman by the name of Edward Jones, who's an Akron resident, is on the executive team for the Association of Black Foundation Executives. They work with Black philanthropy. They published a document called The Need for Black-Led Social Change. And there's a group here that has been working with the GAR Foundation, it was funded by GAR Foundation, has working with the Black Giving Collective, with the Akron Community Foundation, called VOECA, the Black Economic Wellness Coalition of Akron. Understanding that if we're going to address the systemic practices, not just outside that have impacted the Black community, but those things inside the Black community that have led to some of these disparities, that it has to be led by the community. So I'd love to share that information with you as we build this, because too many times what happens is folks outside of the community and handpicked run an initiative more so than those who are actually indigenous. And, so I'd love to share this information with you, because that is critical to any true restorative work, is the funding component.
Yeah, and just so you know, thank you for that. And I think in part from you, I've engaged with BRCA before, and they are noted in the report in that section as like one of the groups that should be connected with.
Thank you. Thank you. Linda Mobian?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Liz, it's so wonderful to see you again and to hear your work. I am just so impressed by the sensitivity that you have taken. I don't care about the length of time. I know you said it took longer than anticipated, but it sounds like it was time well spent. And for you to engage the citizens like you've done, I just can't wait to read your report. My question is, how do you suggest that this body began to look at the work after we review it? Do you have any recommendations as to how we might begin to approach it? Because certainly we're going to read it individually and probably have our discussions in various ways. But in order for us to, and some of us may or may not be on council when the actual dirt is turned or the bricks are laid or whatever. But it's important for us to not let this just sit on the shelf and get dust gathered on it. I think it's important for us to continue to move this forward. So I'm just wondering, do you have a recommendation as to how this body should approach reviewing this together as a unit?
Yeah, and thank you. I appreciate that question. So I think the implementation matrix that is at the end in the appendix, while still being high level, and I don't actually distinguish, when I mentioned city a lot as one of the actors, I don't necessarily distinguish between the administration versus council, but I would say looking at those particular places that have been flagged would be really important. I also think that whereas the master plan process can really engage in a lot of ways with some of the larger site issues, particularly under the healing and repair section, I think a lot of that might be things that need to be undertaken through a combination of council and the administration. And so I think, and there's, so for instance, reparations is a topic I have heard mentioned from people. I said, I think, and what I have seen from communities that have undertaken is you still actually, before you can get to a task force, you even need to figure out, like, is that an appropriate thing to do? What are the things that should be part of it? The restoration fund, whereas I think some of the work could be looked at from an economic development person within the master plan team, I think there are things that have to be looked at from a city perspective to actually figure out what is the support from that. And some of the examples that I offer up show that there are quite a few of these initiatives that actually do require some city funding to be able to move forward. And so I think I would look at both the implementation matrix for the places where the city is flagged as one of the lead actors. I would also look through some of the precedents that are offered up and really take note of the places where it talks about the city coming in to be able to be one of the partners to catalyze it, because I think those are blueprints, or at least trailheads for what council could be doing.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Nancy Holland?
Thank you, Chairman Fusco. Liz, I just wanted to say hello and thank you again. This is deeply important work. And I love how you framed it in terms of the geographic center, but also the deep relevance and meaning for the entire city of Akron. Um, I will never forget your presentation and your interaction with the residents of Ward 1 last spring. It was one of my favorite meetings of any kind, anywhere. And thank you again for that. I remember conversations about the custard stand, and I remember some pretty deep, meaningful connections that happened that night. You used the words healing and repair, and I'm so grateful that that is part of your process, part of your reflection and study of this. So I guess in summary, thank you, thank you, thank you, and I can't wait to see what happens next. And I really think the whole city owes a debt of gratitude to just having this opportunity. I also hope I was candidly a little disappointed to hear that just 5 wards had meetings around this, because I do think that this is a citywide endeavor and concern of deep significance. So thanks for all you've done and all you will do. And I can't wait to read the report.
Thank you,
Thank
Nancy
you.
Holland.
Appreciate it.
Tara Mosley.
Thank you. Liz, a few questions for you. I was looking at your executive summary of those individuals involved in the process. On that executive summary, are any of those individuals' families connected to this project that were vastly affected by the Intermelt project?
Which individuals? The ones that are
There's
on
one
the...
with like stakeholders. I think I've seen, I know Councilwoman Somerville's on there, it is her ward, and I think I've seen Malcolm Costa on there and Brandon Costa, a couple of people like that. I'm just trying to make sure that we always keep a connection to those individuals who came from that neighborhood.
Okay, got it. Yeah, and apologies, it's early in the morning for me right now. I've been cranking on this report all weekend, but I believe that it's about 5 to 6 of the committee membership are former residents. And one of the things that, we would have our advisory group meetings, which would meet for the most part virtually monthly. But I also recognize it was, in some ways, the former residents do extra labor, right? Because they have to share about their experiences in this context. So one of the things that I tried to do was to also make sure that whenever I come to town, I would also basically caucus with them and make sure that I could have a dedicated space where it's just me and them and getting that input. And they were really useful for guiding a process to make sure that we were also getting enough touches within the former resident community. So for instance, kind of why we started looking at, hey, can we go to churches and do Bible study takeovers as an effort to really try to reach as much as possible people who were former residents.
All right, thank you. Lastly, when I attended Councilwoman Holland's meeting back in the spring where you did a presentation, we discussed photos that some people may have just in stockpile at their home. And as I look on the gallery on the website, if there was a way to put an upload feature on there where those individuals who may not be able to attend these meetings but have those historical photos, they could add those. I think that would be a great addition to the website. And then lastly, even connecting, the Akron Urban League has a video from their reunion in their archives, being able to connect those stories, because sometimes, as you know, some of us are readers and some of us are not, but videos everyone watch. Being able to put those video contents on the website where people could actually hear those stories from those residents and their family members who were affected, I think that would go a long way as well, and would also generate a lot of interest in the community. Just couple thoughts. I was just looking
No,
at
no,
what's
no.
on
I
thinking
totally
about it.
totally remember us having a conversation about the photos, and I apologize that I haven't. It's been on the list and I haven't been able to move it forward. But now that this report is done, that's one of the things I can work on. And then we have been trying to get the videos from the Urban League. We have the videos. Right now, the challenge is we're trying to track everybody down to get permissions signed. And so that's what's kind of slowed down the process of getting that onto the website.
I'll email you offline. I happen to know the videographer who did the video, and he has releases from those individuals. So I'll shoot you an
Amazing.
email.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And I would also note one of the other things that has been on a back burner but hope to work on is for those who do want to tell their story. We know that, Roger Riddle is great. We also know that not everybody has time to sit down for an interview with Roger Riddle. And so one of the things, we're in conversations with the Historical Society to also see if we could set up a voicemail line of sorts where people could just call and like, hey, story top of the mind, and leave it that way. So we're trying to create as many opportunities as possible for people to be able to share and transmit information that can be archived.
Thank you.
Thank you again. And as mentioned, we look forward to reading this report and moving forward with it. I think it's important that we recognize Mayor Horrigan and all of his work with regards to ensuring that this process move forward, as well as the partners involved with this. Again, look forward to continuing the work. Any further questions or comments? Do have a couple items on our agenda that we have to deal with. Thank you again for coming in, and appreciate all your hard work. Thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you for having me. And
Thank
I
you.
look forward to talking or seeing to all of you soon.
Thank you. With that, on the regular agenda, I'm going to recommend time. We can move into the new list of legislation. The first item, Ms. Viviano, if you could please read in. I'd appreciate
Sure.
it.
Before we go into new legislation, the committee does have minutes from the previous meeting to approve.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to entertain a motion that we approve the minutes of the previously held meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Very good. The ayes have it. Okay, with that, we'll now move into the new list of legislation. Thank you.
Number 8 is an ordinance approving the project petition for special assessments for special energy improvements projects related to the acquisition, construction, installation, and improvement of certain public improvements in the city of Akron, Ohio, at 241 Furnace Street, Akron, Ohio, in cooperation with the Akron Summit County Energy Special Improvement District Incorporated, approving the necessity of that project, determining to proceed with that project, levying special assessments for the purpose of paying the costs of that project, approving a cooperative agreement and a special assessment agreement related to the project, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Ballman?
That's a lot. But as we've had a number of these over the last few years, this is a PACE financing deal. Correctional Health is the entity also known as, Oriana House. They own 241 Furnace, and 243 is attached as well. They're looking at doing HVAC improvements to the building and wanting to take advantage of the PACE special assessments to do so. If you remember, just in short, this is a way to basically borrow money and put it as, on with your taxes. So the city would issue assessments. Those assessments would go toward paying the bonds. The city would not be on the hook for any of the money
Right.
itself. It goes straight to the property owner.
Yeah, we've done this before with other projects in the past.
So it's about a $625,000 project total.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there a rush for this?
If we could by next week would be wonderful.
Okay, good. Okay, very good. Questions or comments from any committee members? Ms. Mosley?
And no questions, just a comment. I've toured the building with Bernie. I'm excited to see this go forward. So if there's not any more questions, I'll definitely make the motion for suspension of the rules.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments from anyone? Okay, I think maybe consent agenda would be a little better, just to give everybody time to make sure that they can digest, because there's quite a bit here. There's like 30-some pages, so we just want to make sure. Consent agenda is okay with
That would be
administration. So
Okay.
would you mind
I'll
revising?
make that motion for consent agenda.
Thank you very much. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Thank you. The ayes have it. Thank you. Next item, Ms. Viviano.
Item number 9 is a resolution approving and confirming the appointment of Mike Freeman for a term beginning on January 1st, 2024, and expiring on December 31st, 2028, to the City of Akron Planning Commission and declaring an emergency.
Ms. Williams?
I sincerely apologize. I did not send anybody a resume for Councilman Freeman. So
We may have to discuss this and try to learn more about his background.
depths of conversation. Councilman Freeman, I have had a incredible relationship with over the years as the chief city prosecutor, as chief of staff. His commitment to the city and the Kenmore neighborhood is unmatched. That is one of the reasons he is ultimately going to replace Tina Boyce on the Planning Commission. So we have voices from all over town sitting in that commission, making decisions, different viewpoints, but everybody really advocating on behalf of the neighborhoods.
No, that's great. Thank you very much. I know many of us have questions about Mr. Freeman's experience, if it's adequate or not in terms of sitting on this commission, but we'll soldier past those questions.
And again, my apologies for not submitting a resume.
I think we're okay on this. Questions or comments from anyone? No? Is there a recommendation for suspension of the rules? Is there a second? Second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Against? Very good. The ayes have it. And with that, the Planning Committee of Akron City Council is adjourned. Thank you.
Our next committee of the day is the Parks and Recreation Committee. Those committee members are Lombardo, Mosley, Malik, Neal, and Connor. We'll give everyone just a moment here.
Sarah, do you know, is Phil here today? He's logging in? Okay.
Okay, again, our next committee of the day is Parks and Recreation Committee. Councilman Lombardo is chairing. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to ask for a motion to approve the last meeting's minutes.
So move.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Minutes passed. We have one item on our agenda this afternoon. Sarah, would you be so kind to read that in, please?
Sure. Item number 22 is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the construction of Morgan Park Pavilion and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. I see Mr. Luddle is in chambers. Go ahead, Mr. Luddle.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of committee. Yes, over at Morgan Park, this is we're going to put a collaboration with Akron Parks Collaborative. We're going to bid and then award a new pavilion, a 20 by 24 foot pavilion. We are going to rough in for electric, new asphalt paths to connect to the paths that are there. The future for this park will be, rehabilitate the courts. Also, there will be other amenities. We're going to plant some trees out there. For you that don't know where Morgan is, it splits the block there between Brown and Grant Street. So it's about, I don't know, maybe 6 blocks south of 76. So it's kind of, it'd be a great amenity for that neighborhood. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you. Is there any questions from any committee members? I see Councilwoman Mosley.
Thank you, Councilman Lombardo. Chris or you, Francia, do you know if you all plan on putting a fence in between where they tore the building down in the park? Do we know if EPA came in to check the water reserve over there, if any of those items have been addressed yet?
I did not see a fence on the plan, but I will check.
Okay, and I know this is just for one pavilion. If we maybe could think about maybe a pergola like they did at Joy Park.
Yep.
Just to add some other beautification items to the park. And sir, if you could add my name, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you. I think I saw Councilman Malik.
Thank you,
Did you have a
Mr. Chair.
question?
Yep, just kind of going off of Councilwoman Mosley's point, really excited about this project. It's a beautiful park, but to her point, you know, the property next door there has been an ongoing issue. Do you have any status on kind of what some of the discussions are with that adjoining property owner on the remediation of that?
I'm going to let Mr. Lash answer that.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councilman. That particular property or project is still being evaluated by the EPA, from my understanding. So until they finalize that evaluation, we're still at a standstill.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if I see any other hands.
Mr. Chair, I'm not sure if you can see, Councilwoman Connor has her hand raised.
Okay, I didn't see that. Go ahead, Councilwoman Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to thank Akron Parks Collaborative in the city. Working with them, they've done a tremendous job with our parks in the last few years. I also noticed on their website they have a walking trail there. Could we check to make sure there's some benches around that trail for people that can only go short distances?
Absolutely.
To encourage them. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from other council members?
Mr. Chair, Councilwoman Mosley has her hand raised.
Okay, Councilwoman Mosley.
Just another question for you, Francia. When you reach out to the owners of that property to see where they are with the EPA standards, is there a way they could possibly put a fence around it until they can figure out what to do about that water reserve? It just always worries me because of those kids. They cut through that walk through. They're on that way going to and from school, and some of them are still going to the park. And so if they could at least fence it till they figure out what they're going to do with that standing water, I think it'd be a safety issue at this point.
Absolutely, will do, and I will circle back to you with the answer.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? I don't see any hands.
Mr. Chair, if there aren't any other questions, I would make a motion for approval with suspension of the rules.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second for suspension of the rules. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good. Motion passes. And I don't believe there's any other items on our agenda. So with that, our meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Our next committee today is the Rules Committee, and it will begin at 2 o'clock. Those committee members are Freeman, Fusco, Amobian, Connor, and Malik. Again, that's the Rules Committee, and it will begin at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Please, in your personal slide, because it's checks and
Oh, I didn't know who I was moving.
Oh, that's okay. No, it's not. I just go over there, so. No problem. I could do this.
You got it. All right, I'd like to call the Rules Committee meeting to order. And if I could, please, let's have a roll call.
Freeman.
Here.
Fusco. Amobian.
Here.
Connor. Malik.
Aye.
All committee members are present.
Thank you. And if we could have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting, please. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, we have a few old items here. First of all, this has been read in. This is the ordinance authorizing the director of law or his designee to enter into contractor contracts without the formality of publicly advertising for bids, provision of professional services necessary or attendant to the provision of legal services in the city of Akron. Comments from anyone on the other side of the room here?
As a co-sponsor, I'd like to recommend that we refer this item. I think we have further discussion on it. This is the one referencing the law department and how that's going to be handled. So I know there's more discussion, so we would like to just refer this item. Take time, please.
Continue to take time then?
Yeah,
Okay,
I believe my co-sponsor's in favor as well.
Make a motion for time.
All in favor, time? Aye?
Aye.
Thank you. Next is a resolution acknowledging the city's admission, deletion, and removal of Section 56 from the City of Akron's annual operating budget, reaffirming City Council's decision and commitment to ensuring that city contracts involving expenditures in excess of $50,000 are reviewed and authorized by council and declaring an emergency. I'll have to admit to you, I thought we had passed this a long time ago, so Mr. Fricker.
So, we've basically already removed the Section 56 language from the temporary budget that we passed.
Okay, that's what I was referring
this is all, the steps to eliminate that language from the budget ordinances have basically been taken. Yeah, it's not in our temporary, and it will not be in the appropriation ordinance next spring, or next winter, I should say.
Thanks, Steve. Any other comments or questions? Have a motion on this item? Motion to approve?
So moved.
The motion, okay, all in favor, please let it know by saying aye.
Mr. Neal has his hand raised.
Sorry, Mr. Neal, please, thank you.
Hi, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, it's just, this is in line with the total conversation in regards to the effort taken to amend Section 56 to show more transparency and more engagement between council and administration. All that's been greatly appreciated. But in having dialogue with some constituents, they asked for one more thing to be done. When contracts are issued, if it can be disclosed if the contractor has donated to any member of council or the administration's campaign. That's allowed, but let's just make that clear as a part of our full disclosure. We've had many times when constituents have come down and revealed to us that members on council have received funding from, campaign contributions from who have a piece before this council. And I just think in good faith, if you heard Ms. Liz when she spoke, she talked about the building of trust. That would be one more piece to put in here, just that if a contractor or someone that has legislation comes before council that is fully disclosed, if anyone on council or the administration has received any kind of campaign contribution.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Neal. I'm not seeing any other hands. What's the committee's favor?
I believe I heard a motion on the floor for suspension of the rules. I'm not sure that I
Sorry,
heard a
did not
second.
hear that, so.
I'm not sure I heard a second.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Very good. All right, number 3 is an ordinance amending and or supplementing Title 3, Chapter 30, Mayor and Council, Section 30.01, Meetings of the Akron Codified Ordinances in order to provide for safe, accessible, and efficient city council meetings and declaring an emergency. Anyone would like to speak? Mr. Fusco?
Yeah, I believe this is the piece referencing, primarily like what's permitted in here. It seems as in our chambers during our meetings. I believe this addresses not only the council meetings at 7 o'clock, but also the committee meetings. It seems as though somewhat of an unsafe environment in terms of banners and backpacks and a lot of things. From talking to individuals, there's a feeling that it's become almost as if it's. I don't want to go as far as to say a sporting event, but there has been banners and big signs and so on and so forth. And I believe we have a responsibility to the city of Akron to provide decorum.
Sorry, Mr. Fusco. Any other comments or questions? Yes, Mr. Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think my comments apply to both this piece and the next piece because I think they kind of go hand in hand. I really would urge council to wait until the new year to adopt these proposals for a couple of reasons. The first is that just in the last few weeks since they've been introduced, there has been a lot of pushback. I think that the general sentiment in the community is that we need more public engagement, not less. And I worry that these proposals together and individually will reduce the amount of public engagement that we have. I do think there are changes that are needed, but I think we have to be very careful, even from a legal perspective, in making sure that changes aren't viewed as happening in response to particular viewpoints that have been shared in recent weeks. This is something that has come up in Cleveland in recent weeks. They're also proposing rule changes to public comment, and there the director of the First Amendment Clinic at Case Western Reserve Law School shared the same thing, that even things like limiting banners and things like that, if they're proposed in response to specific viewpoints that have been shared very, very recently, they could be viewed as not viewpoint neutral. So we have to be careful from a legal perspective on that piece. The other piece is just whether it's a matter of good policy. The Beacon Journal editorial board wrote an editorial this weekend. It said, "Let the public speak. Akron City Council should be cautious about meeting changes." And I think, the primary points that I agree with them on are that, particularly limiting the total number of commenters is a significant step in limiting the ability for people to speak, right? If 30 people show up, we should listen to all 30 people. And, how are we going to pick which 10 people get to speak? And I think it's just a matter of fairness. This is a unique situation. This is a forum that people don't have at the state level or the federal level. And while it may be difficult sometimes, I think that it is important. I think also limiting the topics on which people can speak is a significant concern. Limiting it solely to matters within council's authority. It can be debated what that means, but I worry that also, limits people depending on the content of what they want to speak on. I think there are plenty of ways in which we can improve public comment. I think that we should work with the new council to create a new system in which, people feel, and we all feel like we're improving the quality of the process and the availability for people to comment, but I think that comes with more engagement, not less. And then finally, several of us, including myself, are leaving within the next 2 weeks. And for us to bind the hands of a group that's going to start in January, I think is inappropriate. And so for those reasons, I'm not going to support these two pieces. And I really would encourage us to take time and let a new council dive into this. I think there are limitations, like limitations on certain obstructions and size of obstructions and things like that, and that can be taken as straightforward safety measures, but I worry that this is too broad and that we're making a mistake with this.
Thank you. Ms. Somerville?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And I want to be clear, we are talking about number 3, which addresses bringing backpacks and banners and whistles and smoking and vamping devices into council. So I disagree that safety cannot wait. We already see what's happening in the community, just as what is happening in the community can very well happen right here in these council chambers. And I do believe we have a responsibility to make sure that every person who comes through this door is safe, right? And so some of these things that you see here listed are actually some recommendations from our Akron Police Department. We live in different times. And so when we talk about people bringing in backpacks and things of that nature, and we don't necessarily know what's in those backpacks, or people holding up large signs which are obstructing their faces, or what they're doing in the chambers, seating area, those are safety concerns. And I think that we should take safety should be number 1 priority. And to say that we should wait, I don't think is very responsible. And I think these recommendations and things that we are talking about are very reasonable. In fact, I think this type of policy should be implemented at all city buildings to keep all workers and people who utilize our city buildings safe. So I do want to say that I think this piece is important. I think safety should be on the top of our mind always. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll come to, Ms. Holland, your hand was up. I don't know if it's not up now, though. You still wanting to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In the earlier presentation that we enjoyed from Liz Agbu, I expressed my concern that only 5 of 10 wards actually hosted a meeting for her to share her expertise and her visions for the city. And I'm thinking about that as I'm listening to the comments of my colleagues. And it is my sincere feeling that my job is to represent and be the voice of the people of Ward 1, and that it is also my job to give the people of Ward 1 as many and as robust an opportunity to express themselves, to bring their concerns and their ideas and their questions to me as is humanly possible, whether it's through a community meeting or facilitating participation in full council meetings, responding promptly to phone calls and emails, or having a good conversation in a grocery store parking lot. This has been the job. I do appreciate the comments of my colleagues made just now. And I come back round again to what I see this job as being. And it is purely because of the number of communications I've received since this matter has first been presented for council consideration that I will vote against these 2 rule changes. And the reasons are complex. As a limited public forum, it is within the realm of appropriate regulation to address safety. There's no question. And hardly anyone in this meeting or any other meeting, I would think, can identify a situation where safety concerns are not addressed at, entry into a public building or into a public meeting. All of this said, I believe that this matter requires some close examination. Also, I believe that the new council should be included in that conversation. And again, it has been the overwhelming feedback from the people of Ward 1 to vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to jump back into the chambers for a moment, and then I'll come to Ms. Amobian and Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Chairman Freeman. I echo the sentiments of my colleague, Councilman Malik. I too last week expressed my concerns about limiting public comment. As we talk about Section 30.01, when we talk about backpacks and signs, that's what security downstairs is for. That's what we paid them for, is to look through backpacks. We're now talking about reporters who carry their information in their backpacks when they come into the building. So now we're going to say certain people look like reporters can bring a backpack in. We have students who come here from the university. They walk down here for meetings. So where do they leave their backpacks if this passes? Some parents come down with their children and they have their diaper bags with them. So security is there to provide those measures of safety. That's what they're being paid to do. So to say that you want to limit a backpack for whatever that reason, or a diaper bag, or even a big purse, I think it's just a far reach. As it relates to the signs, it's still the freedom of speech that I'm concerned about, that we're trying to limit. I understand some of our municipalities, they do bring up, see, Anna has a backpack and she's a reporter, and that was not even supposed to be like that. This is what I'm saying, she's a reporter with a backpack. We just have to be very mindful of what we're doing here. I can understand when we talk about signs that have profanity on it. I get that, especially when we have children in the gallery. But again, it's a form of expression, it's their freedoms that I believe that we are now infringing on. So I'm not on this committee, but if it makes it to the floor, I won't support it, because I think the public has a right to be here. And I quite honestly would have to say that I feel more safe around this horseshoe, knowing that they have all these measures that they have to go through just to come into this horseshoe with us, sometimes than when I'm out in the public knowing that some people have adverse opinions of us. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'll come to Ms. Amobian.
I think I've been very clear that I'm opposed to all of these restrictions personally. I don't think it's necessary, particularly when we give people 3 minutes and all of that. 3 minutes is not a long time, and I am not interested in restricting anybody's rights personally. Now, I've only seen one sign in the gallery that I had a problem with. And if that young person comes back with that particular sign, with that wording, I will speak to her myself. Outside of that, I don't want to infringe on anybody's rights. And I've said this all along, that I am not really sure who thought of these things and why they are coming to us. If you really want to make some substantial changes that will focus on safety and all other kind of matters, it would make more sense to me for us to put together some kind of task force so we could have a conversation that would involve citizens as well as council members. But I am not supporting any of this, and I've already spoken to this before. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm pretty much going to echo what everyone else said.
Rush, you froze up here. We'll hang on a sec. Mr. Neal, you're still froze up on our end here. We'll take a couple more secs and see if maybe he can come back in. Yeah, it looks like he's going to try to come back in.
Council.
While we're waiting for Mr. Neal, I will come back to Ms. Holland.
Mr. Chairman?
Oh, there we go. Ms. Holland, Mr. Neal just came back in. All right, go right ahead, Mr. Neal.
Okay, thank you, sir. Yeah, I was just going to say, and excuse me for moving, that's why you see me on there twice. I concur with my colleagues, but I want us to remember when we had a special seminar on freedom of speech. Our constituents have a right to express themselves, even if it's in using language that we aren't comfortable with. The other thing is, I do want to, Councilwoman Mosley spoke on a good thing, and one of our constituents spoke on it last week when we talked about changing the time and everything, how a lot of them rush for work from work and they use backpacks because they use public transportation or other modes that require them to carry what they have in a backpack. So, I mean, I understand the concern for safety, but as has been stated, we have security downstairs. Everybody's scanned and they come in. I just hope we take time to hear those who have expressed their concern, and that not only take time, but drop some of these suggested rule changes.
Thank you. Now I'm going to come back into chambers to Mr. Malley.
I was going to make a motion, but it appears Ms. Holland has a comment, so.
Ms. Holland, did you have something you wanted to add?
Just one more thing. And thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Councilman Malik. What is interesting and noteworthy is that at least one of my colleagues has mentioned that simultaneously do not wish to regulate speech, but at the same time, if a particular turn of phrase is used or a particular sign is displayed, that's different. And I think it's important that we all bear in mind that it will never be our job to regulate the content of speech in this hall, in this forum. There is a rational, realistic, and appropriate concern that goes with safety. And I would be remiss if I did not mention that there has been, although outnumbered by the numbers of Ward 1 folks who have contacted me about the proposed rule changes urging a no vote, there have been those who have expressed concern about whether the environment at City Hall is safe and welcoming to them. And so I would urge all of us as we move forward to remember that, you know, in the words of, it might have been Patrick Henry, and I'm going to be sorry that I didn't look this up ahead of time, but dissent is the highest form of patriotism. But at the same time, we all, every member of our community, carries a different kind of sacred obligation to one another that is different from the conversation we're having right now, to create an environment where all can be heard and all can be received in a way that feels okay and safe. So, you know, again, I want to reaffirm and encourage that the council consider talking about this, whether I will confess task force, I don't know. Can every member of this body do better talking to constituents, holding regular meetings? Probably. Because I think that at the end of the day, what we're looking at here is demand to be heard. And it's, coming from both sides of this issue, both those who are concerned about being in a safe and welcoming environment and those who want no restrictions whatsoever. Again, I've stated my position on this. Thank you.
All right. I think I come to Miss Amobium next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to be real clear. I oppose restricting anybody's right to speech, and I oppose any form that that may take. However, when you see something, when I see something, I can only speak for Linda Mobian, that I think is something that is not respectful enough for all people, like children and so forth. If I take it upon myself to say something to the person, if they choose not to hear it, it's up to them. Uh, but I, like I said, I've only seen one sign that I took somewhat offense to, and it's not about, you know, reprimanding anybody, just making a comment to the person if I choose to do that. Um, and additionally, we give people 3 minutes to talk. And so we already have control over how much time they take. If they come down every week, they just have 3 minutes. And that's not a lot of time to give people. And for folks who want to come down and share with us, what I find shocking is that we're saying we don't even want to hear from the people, and we are their representatives. And certainly, I want to hear from any and everybody because I learn a lot when I listen to the people talk. They educate me in so many different ways. So, again, I will be voting against both of these pieces, and those are the reasons I would give you. Thank you.
Ms. Connor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to say I only want to speak on the piece that we're talking about, bringing stuff in, backpacks, bags, and things. You know, I never thought 4 years ago that I would feel unsafe at council, and it has come up multiple times in these next 4 years. It is very unnerving for a job that I work so hard for and love with all my heart, I would be asked to stay home. And many times I have been asked to stay home because it is not safe sometimes because of the climate of council. And in an emergency, it is difficult for me to get out of this building. I need you to think about that. If this room is unsafe for me, it is unsafe for all of us. And there are times when that's going to happen. And if putting these restrictions on is uncomfortable and hard for people, I'm sorry, but sometimes life is hard. And we all have an obligation and a responsibility to feel safe.
Thank you. I would just say, I'm not going to be here a month from now. So good luck to the new folks, all right? But I will say at 22 years, this past months have been entirely different. And I also think from my experience, I sit right there. I think I might hear some things sometimes that Mr. Kamer might not, because he's, and it does get frightening at times. So whatever we do with this, I do believe, one of the things that I strongly believe is that we do need to address very sternly the disrespect that's being shown to this council in this room. Clapping, catcalling, whatever this is. I think, I don't know what we're going to do today, but I think that's got to be addressed, because when you're sitting, and I've been remote here for several weeks, and you don't see it as much, but boy, in these chambers, all we're missing is 3 rings and a ringmaster. It's not a becoming look. So I'll come to Mr. Neal, and then I'll come back to Ms. Holland.
Make a motion.
Ms. Holland was before me, Mr.
Oh,
Chairman.
okay, I'm sorry. Thank you. Ms. Holland?
Thank you, Mr. Neal, and thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to commend my colleague, Councilwoman Connor, for, I think, bringing this into sharp focus. There is a vast difference, and I attempted to make the point. I think I fell a little short. There is a difference between regulating content of speech and drawing a line around safety. And I'm grateful for her clear, strong statement of concern about safety. Now, I have framed my concerns in terms of members of the community who have communicated to me that they have either left a council meeting out of fear or have declined to attend a council meeting out of fear. But I think it is no small thing to consider that every person in city council chambers has a right, which should be unrestricted, to be present. Now, when we say unrestricted, in the meaning and the history of this kind of conversation, the idea is that everybody has a right to not just express within reason, right? But also everyone has a right to not have their expression suppressed out of fear. So, thank you, Councilwoman Connor, and thank you all for this good conversation.
All right, Mr. Neal, your hand went
Yes,
down? Okay.
yes, sir. And again, appreciate all that's been shared. And it lets us know that there's many different sides to this. But we have to remember that that chamber belongs to the people. And for over a month, we've restricted them from even coming down there for what was stated by the administration, by the chief, a threat that didn't exist, a bomb threat. That is real. All because we did not want to engage the public. The administration admitted that there wasn't a bomb threat, the police chief, the safety director, and that came from this council. So we have work to do, again, to rebuild trust. Are the safety issues real? Yes. But you know what, folks? It comes with the job. Just honestly, I have never felt unsafe coming down to council. Never. I understand the frustration that many in our community have with having their voices silenced and not being heard, and not issues and concerns not being addressed. The more we open and engage the horseshoe, the more we create opportunities for folks to come to our meetings. I think it takes the pressure off of things spilling over into the community, and not just coming down to be heard, but then us actually moving and taking action to address those concerns. So I'm glad that many colleagues have requested time and that we not move on this. But please understand that we created this atmosphere where citizens have been frustrated and have come down to express themselves the way they have by restricting them from coming for over a month to their chamber.
Any other comments? Mr. Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everybody for the robust discussion that we're having. I just want to return to a point that has come up a couple of times. It's really important that we not limit people's expression any more than we need to. I absolutely agree that safety has to be a top priority. Safety is my first priority. I'm so glad that we have the folks down there screening people every day. I think that's really important in this day and age that we're living in. And I think we have some work to do probably in improving that process. We can many of us who have access can come up through the basement. And so we probably need to revisit some of the ways in which that happens, right? But I do want to just illustrate a point, right? Under this proposal that would ban all flags and banners, if someone walks up to the podium and they're holding a little Israeli flag or Palestinian flag or Estonian flag, that's prohibited under these rules, right? That doesn't provide a safety risk to anybody, but it's prohibited under these rules. The rule as proposed is more broad than it needs to be. And I want to update my facts. Not only did that Cleveland First Amendment Law Clinic raise those concerns to council, but they have sued Cleveland City Council now. So we do have to be very careful in the steps that we take while absolutely making sure that this is a safe and welcoming place. To Councilwoman Holland's point, I also received and conveyed to Council President concerns that were raised by one of my residents about a month ago, that they came, the room was at capacity. They had to wait in the hall. They felt uncomfortable. They didn't feel like they were actually able to observe the meeting, and they left. And my thought and suggestion was maybe we can create more capacity and space, because it's mostly a function of having lots of people, and so there's overcrowding, and that can make people anxious. We could open up the conference room, and we could show the meeting, stream the meeting on that screen. We can create other space in which people can wait comfortably and safely. And we all have a responsibility to listen to comments even when there's disrespect and tension. There's been a lot of disrespect and tension. And honestly, that creates fear sometimes. And there's some of that we can't remove entirely, again, because this is a public forum in which people are allowed to share their anger and frustration. And so I think we have to, again, be very careful with how we do that. I don't know if there are any other comments, but I was also going to make a motion for time.
Mr. Fusco?
Yes, I'd like to rise against time with respect to Mr. Malik and his concerns and what he had brought forward. But I would like to rise against time. We had heard from the co-sponsor, President Somerville, that whenever it comes to safety, delaying, I don't believe would be in the city's best interest. We also heard that this came directly from those who are professional in terms of public safety. And so with that, I just rise against time.
Okay, very good, thank you. Yeah, I myself too, like I say, I'm leaving, but just to make a point that this council needs to do something, I'll be opposing time as well. So we have a motion for time. What do I do with his opposition to time?
There was a motion, but there was not a second. So if there's not a second, then the motion
I'm
fails.
sorry, I didn't get a second. Okay.
I second the time.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor of time, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Nay. All right, roll call, please.
Sure. Freeman?
Nay.
Fusco?
Nay.
Amobian?
Aye.
Connor? And Malik?
Aye.
The motion for time does not pass.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion for a favorable report.
The motion for favorable report, is there a second? Second. All those in favor of a favorable report, let it be known by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Roll call, please.
Freeman?
Aye.
Fusco?
Aye.
Amobian?
Nay.
Connor? And Malik?
Nay.
The motion for a favorable report passes 3-2.
Okay, thank you. If you would please go ahead and read in the next for me.
Item number 4 is a resolution amending Resolution Number 2, 2021, to amend and/or supplement the rules of procedure for the Akron City Council and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Fusco?
Yes, thank you. I rise in favor of this particular proposal. This, in fact, is the one that states we heard from the community in terms of that want to speak before council actually meets. We heard that. And I'll be honest with you, I wasn't totally on board with that, but I certainly understand the logic behind it. The intentions behind this, I believe, is again, efficiency is mentioned, is running our council meetings in a professional manner, is quality versus quantity. It's also, I believe, we have a unique situation here in Akron versus many cities in that we are virtual and we allow the folks, or we have space for the folks to come in and speak to us whenever perhaps it's tough for them to even get down here. Or someone's a bit ill. We have that. Not many cities do that. And if you compare us to many other cities out there, they too have limitations. Some of our commissions here in the city has a half-hour time frame. But the striking thing for me during this last discussion that we had was how many people said, you know, I talked to so many of my constituents and they said this. And it's kind of like on both sides of the issue, if you will. Obviously, those that like to see the public comment unrestricted have been more vocal. But also, you know, if we step back and think about, you know, what has happened over these last several years in terms of things that we heard right here at this podium, the things we heard, and what we've done as a result of some of that. We saw the white coats, RIP medical debt, right? Riverwoods. What was an outcome of Riverwoods? Obviously, there was many that wasn't happy, but then again, conversely, what was some of the outcomes? The outcomes was the Merriman Valley Master Plan. That was one of the outcomes, because we heard from the community. The riparian ordinance, that was another outcome, because we heard from the community from this podium. And there's other examples. I could go on and on and on, and everybody knows of those. Whenever folks had come to us and said, you know, maybe you should consider this, maybe you should consider that. That has happened time and time again. And with that, I believe that this is something that this would, again, provide efficiency. It would provide a level of professionalism, I believe. I know the school board and many councils and other entities out there, they have time limits on what can the public comment period. But again, and I talked to a lot of you, especially the ward folks, you know, not so much us at large, but the ward folks. You guys are always telling me about your phone calls at midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning that you get, and you're always accessible and available through that. I've attended many of your your ward meetings. I've seen up to 100 and over people at these ward meetings. So I believe we are accessible and we're always listening. And I believe we have a track record of doing that.
Thank you.
So I rise in favor of this proposal. I'd like to make a motion for a favorable report.
If we can, for one, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. President Somerville?
Thank you so much. I just want to really share, again, this proposal came forth really in attempts to make public comment period more meaningful. I have never understood why public comment period was conducted at the end of the meeting. So being really intentional, moving public comment to the beginning of the meeting, we're putting constituents first. An opportunity for constituents to address this body before any vote or any action is taken. That is the one aim of this piece. The other piece, which I think people don't like too much, is the fact that 10 individuals can speak. But again, whether you go to the school board to speak before that official body, or you go to county council before that official body, there is a limit. Why? Because there's more on the agenda than public comment. And I think what I've heard, and I want to thank those who have reached out to share with me their concerns, but I think this body has to be charged with the idea or notion that we have to do more than just thinking 3 minutes at the podium is enough in terms of hearing from our constituents. And we've got to create more opportunities to have real, true dialogue with constituents, whether that's through community meetings. We just got a presentation on the Interbelt, right? Giving more opportunities like that for constituents to actually have a seat at the table and help to shape policy and ordinances. That is productive. That's what we should be doing. How can we better engage our constituents? Again, these changes are trying to make council meeting, particularly public comment, more productive, more meaningful, and more efficient. We are not restricting what people say when they come to that podium. Those 3 minutes, they can speak and say and share whatever it is that they want. There is no limiting of content or speech. When we say limiting 10 people and giving everyone an opportunity once every 30 days, the reason why we're doing that is because we want everyone to have an opportunity to address this body. If that piece was not included, you'd have the same 10 people addressing this body every single Monday. The reality of it is if only 5 people sign up for public comment period, and there's 5 spots left, someone who's already spoken could get an opportunity to address this body on more than one occasion. But again, that is put in place so that everyone gets an opportunity. And it's not the same individuals who are monopolizing the process. So again, I rise in support of these changes. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Come to Mr. Malik, and then I'll come to Terry. Terry, you had your hand. Okay, very good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to share a little bit more about why I'm opposed to these changes. Right now, if 11 people come down to speak to us, then all of them have the ability to speak. 11 or 1 or 100. Last week, it was about 20 people. Right, 20 people at 3 minutes apiece. I'm not a mathematician. Lawyers can't do math, but it's something that we signed up for, and this proposal would limit that. Right, it would say that 11th person does not get the opportunity to speak, or the 12th, or the 13th, or the 14th person, and I think we should not be limiting those voices. The other portion of it is that people have to sign up by 4 p.m. In order to speak. Now, oftentimes, I think we've all seen instances where, somebody out in the community, they may not know all about council rules and procedures, but someone will say, hey, why don't you go down? The city council meeting is tonight at 7, right? And, if they come at 6:45 right now, they can sign up and they can speak. They would not be able to do so under this proposal. The same thing with the limitation on speaking once every 30 days. It's a limitation that I don't think is necessary. So I've heard from many residents who oppose this, and I will oppose it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Freeman. I too do not support amending rules of procedure for several reasons. This was a ballot initiative that went to the people because we had community leaders and activists who went out and got signatures to have it put on the ballot because they felt like the people deserved a voice down here. But now we're saying they don't deserve a voice down here. I agree with moving public comment to the beginning of the meeting. I think we've actually did motions before where we move public comment to the front of a meeting because those residents want to speak on an issue that is before us for a vote. I understand that. I support that. Moving council meetings to 6:30, I think that works as well. Support that. But now we're talking about who can speak and who cannot. If there's an issue going on in the neighborhood, for instance, remember Ladue Reservoir? We were at council till almost 11 o'clock at night, but those residents wanted to be heard. So how do we now go in and pick which 10 residents can speak? That seems like we're making more work for our clerk of council than we need to, because now they have to go and pick who can speak and who cannot. I don't think that's fair to the people or to this office who's already handling a lot of work for this body. Changes I think need to be made. Zoom was put in place for COVID. Zoom should have not been put in place for luxury and for comfort. If you're sick, absolutely stay home. If you have a family emergency, absolutely stay home. No one wants anybody down here if they got COVID. Nobody wants somebody down here if they're sick. If you're away on business, I get that. It works in the afternoon because, again, most people don't know these are part-time jobs. Most of council have jobs outside of council. I get that during the afternoon, but in the evening, if none of these things apply, we have people who have voted for us to be around this horseshoe, and that's where we should be, unless those other things apply. And this is not about singling any council members out. Those who are here know they're here. Those who are doing the work, this has nothing to do with you. But going forward with this new body coming in, I think it should be put in place where it's not a luxury for people. Our residents did not vote for us to sit at home on Zoom. They did not. My colleague and friend Sharon Connor, who she'll come even when she doesn't feel well. So if Sharon can come when she doesn't feel well, none of us have an excuse unless we don't feel well, unless we have COVID or we're out of town for whatever reason. That is a rule within this procedure I think needs to be tweaked, but it needs to be tweaked by the new council, not by us. It needs to be, all of this should be tweaked by those new members coming in. Have enough faith in them to do the work that they've been charged to do come January 1. I don't think we should be doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Please pardon me if I don't get the order right, but all three of you will have opportunity, and I'll start with Ms. Hamobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There was some discussion prior to this about having a time to speak before council so people can give input into legislation. And then there was some talk about at the end of the meeting. Although I'm not supporting this resolution, are we talking about having 2 times to speak or just one?
Legislation. I think if you read the legislation, you'll see it doesn't speak to a
I
time
read
at
it.
the end.
I just want to be clear, Mr. Fusco.
Sure, right?
Are we talking about 2 times or 1 time?
Just one.
6:30.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll come to Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To Ms. Mobian's point, the suggestion was made. I don't think it was only made by me, but since I know I made it, I can understand the limitation of 10 if we start at 6:30, because you want to be able to start the meeting on time for those who do come down for the meeting to hear it. Having 10 persons who can speak to an issue that is coming up to vote. Now, how do we choose that? I don't know. But then keeping the public comment period after council for those who want to speak, no matter how many it may be. Again, the chamber belongs to the people. And as far as leaving this to the new council, I agree, but under these conditions. And I said this before, this council, before members were even trained on policy or anything, changed this council's rules in the first meeting, before even being orientated on how the rules work and whatnot. Change the rules to be able to control access and how this council works. I'm for the new council, but not without being trained. Keep the rules as they are until the council goes through the legislative training of the Ohio Municipal League for newly elected officials, that this council pays some close to $14,000 a year to be a member of. And I've also mentioned that this council needs to go through budget training that's offered. And then also have training that's coordinated with our finance department so that council can properly exercise its authority and responsibility. But to ask council to make these changes without being educated or trained, I think is really irresponsible. Again, I said this before, we don't put our people out on the street to run our street sweepers. There's not one city job where people aren't trained so that they can provide the best service to our constituents. Why would we ask the legislative body that sets the rules? Why wouldn't we provide them with training so that we're not in this position that we are right now, creating bad policy?
Thank you. Ms. Holland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The position I stated with regard to the first piece concerning proposed changes to how council operates, those stated positions stand for this as well. I oppose the proposed changes, not because they are, they all land in the exact same way for me personally, but because I've heard from in excess of 50 Ward 1 residents who have stated specifically their opposition and have articulated their reasons why. I think it's important that as we deliberate here and as we move this forward, whether it's tonight or whether it's with regard and respect for the coming new members of council, that we consider that this is not, what's not before us is, among other things, a recurring item that I think we should all have a little concern about, which is that I hear it suggested that perhaps we should all produce a doctor's excuse when we avail ourselves of using Zoom. That will certainly be within the scope of what the new city council might consider doing with regard to using Zoom. But I think that we should consider what it is we're actually discussing today and what it is that we're actually entertaining. I think that the task at hand is relatively simple. I don't think it's hard. You don't have to have been a lawyer for 36 years, like at least one of us has been, to be able to differentiate between things that we do for safety and things that cross a line into content regulation. Okay, it's not hard. And respectfully, I think we should try to keep this conversation and this matter focused to the legislation at hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Kamer?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If we move forward with this, we as council can always come back later in the future and revisit it. We can, test the waters out and see how this works out. And we can always come back and change it back to the current format, or even make changes or additions. I like hearing from the residents, and thank you for coming down and giving your public comment periods during public comment period. It's easy to vote against this and not come out with a compromise. And what I would encourage, and this is no attack or nothing against the next mayor, but I would encourage our next mayor and his administration to open their door up to the public more and be accessible. I do hear a lot about being transparent and being more inclusive. And, our next mayor and his administration can open up these chambers after our council meetings and have a public forum and invite us council members to stay and listen to those folks. Because as I sit here on the Mondays, I think it's kind of mixed in regards to the residents speaking to us on city council topics, and then also topics that include or more geared to the mayor and his administration. So moving forward, like I said, I'll support this, but I definitely would like us to maybe come back and revisit it in the future to see if we can make some changes, so we can at least try this out. But I definitely would encourage the next administration to open up their doors to the public, because this, like I said, this is no attack to the current mayor or the former mayor, Don Pasquale. Since we've had public comment period under those two, is open your door up and listen to the public too. This is a perfect opportunity to move forward with that. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Somerville?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make it very clear to Councilwoman Mosley's point in terms of who would be selected to speak out of those 10 individuals. There's no picking of who would speak. It is first come, first serve. Okay.
Thank you.
Me?
Yep, Mr. Malik?
Great. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wanted to echo and wholeheartedly agree with my colleague from Ward 7's comments. I absolutely think that all of the branches of government here locally should be very engaged in public engagement. I know that there's currently a position that is currently up to be applied for a public engagement strategist for the new administration, and I would encourage any member of the public who would like to apply to consider doing so. And that person might be able to work not only with every department in our city and the boards and commissions, but also with this body in developing forums and opportunities to engage with the public. And I hope that that person is a resource, and that I don't know about the idea of opening up the room after council meetings, but I'm totally interested if this council is. I agree that oftentimes what is discussed are things that are more apt for a one-on-one conversation, but sometimes hearing them in the public comment period, for me at least, sparks a question of whether, maybe it's a policy change that's needed if we keep hearing the same kind of thing time after time. So just wanted to add that.
Thank you. Mr. Fusco?
Mr. Chairman, I made a motion,
Okay, so there is a motion for suspension of the rules, the favorable report. All in favor, let it be known by saying.
It needs a second.
Oh, I keep forgetting second. Second that? Ms. Connor, I apologize. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Nay.
Aye. All in opposed, nay.
Nay.
Roll call.
Freeman.
Aye.
Fusco. Amobian.
Nay.
Connor. Malik.
Nay.
The motion to approve passes 3-2.
Okay, very good. All right. Sarah, do we have anything else? Do we have anything new coming in?
You do not have anything else in rules.
Okay, we are adjourned at 3:05. Thank you so much. What's next?
Our next committee today is the Public Service Committee. Those committee members are Mosley, Kamer, Holland, Lombardo, and McKittrick.
Public service.
We'll give everyone just a moment here. Thanks.
Sarah, I'm ready whenever you are.
I'm ready when you are, Madam Chair.
Okay, if we could call public service to order. If I could get approval of our previous meeting minutes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The ayes have it. We have several pieces coming before us. We don't have anything on the old agenda, right? I don't think we do. Just want to make sure.
You do not have anything on the regular agenda. Thank you.
First piece is an ordinance levying special assessments for the improvement of Waterloo Road between the termini of Interstate 77 and 100 feet east of Brewster Creek by constructing and reconstructing curbs, concrete sidewalks, driveway approaches, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Letto?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. Yes, the Brewster culvert we replaced last year. It's been a year. All those residents or all those businesses abutting did get an estimate of their assessment for the replacement of sidewalk or curb. Now that that project has been completed and the warranty is over, they will get a bill. Obviously, they could either pay it over the 5 years on their taxes, or they can choose to pay it in full.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Council? Seeing none, what's your pleasure, Mr.
Consent's
Little?
fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is an ordinance authorizing Director of Public Service or his designee without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Burgess and, is it NIPO or Nipple? Because I got that wrong
NIPL.
last time. Nipple.
NIPL.
Inc. for the implementation of CSO Program Management Team Operation Maintenance Project and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. Yes, this will complete the 2023 portion of the CMOM program and for the 2024. They are the project management team. Some of the things that they are responsible for is our annual CMOM program reviews, our annual CMOM training. They assist us with manhole repairs and recommendations. They do track all the TV and cleaning that we do every 5 years. So I want to say one thing about this program. You know, this 8 years ago was probably north of $15 million a year, and it's down to less than $2 million for 2 years, or about $1 million a year. So we're getting close to this. With that, I'll take any questions.
Okay. Any questions from committee members? Council? Seeing none, what's your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts with Burgess and NIPO for preliminary design services for the Enhanced High Rate Treatment EHRT facility and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of committee. Yes, some of you may have heard, but Wednesday we did get a ruling and order issued by the federal court. They accepted our third amendment for the smaller tunnel, which is great news. With that being said, the tunnel's underway. The machine's being constructed in Germany as we speak. This high-rate treatment facility is designed or in the consent decree at the end of the OSIT tunnel, which was finished in 2020. You all know that we are opposing building this facility, but to meet the consent decree, it has to be designed.
Right.
So to design something for $200 million, we have a disagreement currently with the U.S. EPA that there should be a stay, but just to move forward, we are doing this, we're issuing this $200,000 very preliminary design to meet the criteria. We have to have a bid by April 30th of 2024. We hope to hear something before then, but we're looking at alternate technologies. We actually had somebody in today looking at a type of a technology. It's called a fuzzy filter. So that's what this is for. We will only use this as needed as we hear about this further update from the court.
Okay. All right, thank you. Any questions from committee members? Seeing none. Chris, I noticed on here the design starts in January, so I'm going to do gotta get a motion for suspension of the rules.
Make that motion to suspend
Second.
the rules.
We have a motion and a second for suspension of the rules with a favorable report. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is ordinance I'm on 13, right? Okay.
Yes.
Ordinance authorizing Director of Public Service or his designee without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Arcadis US Inc. for design services and Answer Advisory for construction management services with WRF Headworks and declaring an emergency. Mr. Little?
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. The Headworks facility we currently constructed down at WRF and which is the intake of all the effluent into the plant. We added a couple things to that project which needed design and construction management. They're wrapping up that project currently, and one of the big changes is the way we take in leachate. So leachate is a runoff from landfills, and we are regulated to take this leachate from these tanker trucks, which obviously reduces the trucking costs from some of the landfills in the area. We do charge 3 to 4 cents a gallon to take this leachate. Last year alone, we generated over $1 million that goes into the sewer fund. The problem was that we had tankers lined up down at the plant because we had the way to unload it. We had to pump out of the tanks into our primary tanks. So what we did with this reconfiguration, we installed 2 pits where the tankers can back into and drop off their leachate by gravity. The other project that we added to this is our entrance on the south end of the plant. It was so close to that curve with these trucks coming and going all the time, it was a pretty dangerous thing. So we moved that south entrance up about, I think it was about 300 feet, about a football field to the north to give those people more room as they come around that corner. So with that, I will take any questions.
All righty. Any questions from committee members? So Chris, on here, design seems like it should have already started.
Basically, it's done. You know, with the issue 56, we established this, so we need to pay him.
Okay.
Okay?
Okay.
But we're bringing it into so we can pay him.
Right, okay. Can I get a motion for suspension of rules?
So moved.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ayes have it. Next piece is ordinance authorizing Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of public advertising for bids with DLZ Ohio, Inc. for design management or construction in connection with the Riverside Sewer Separation CSO RAC 34 project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Ludlow?
This is another project that we started in anticipation of receiving a third amendment. This is the separation of RAC 34. Those are the 10 streets basically off Cauga Falls Avenue all the way up to Riverside. So DLZ did the initial design. Now that we've received that third amendment and the approval, they will complete this design, and also they will add some construction services during the construction of these storm sewer installations. This is a separation project. So this flow will only be sanitary going to the north side interceptor tunnel.
Right, okay. Any questions from committee members? Council? Seeing none, can I get a motion for suspension of the rules?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts with Rapheltis Financial Consultants, Inc. for the Customer Information System Implementation Support Agreement and declaring an emergency. That was a mouthful.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The next 3 pieces are all related to the water meter replacement program. So we always knew when we did the water replacement program that we were going to hire some consultants to help us do this implementation. This first piece for Rapheltis is for the customer information system, and they will provide, they're providing management services, testing, and implementation when we go over to the new billing system and how we report back to our customers. So unfortunately, with supply chain issues, because of COVID is what they're blaming it on, we didn't get the meters really on a timely basis. That's why we're bringing this now. So we're probably about 35,000 meters installed out of the 85,000. So things are moving along at a pretty good pace now, better than what they were last year. So we're hoping to have everything installed late summer, and Rapheltis is going to be starting that new billing, and we're working with them right now. So Encuesta was the old service that we used, and obviously you had a piece last week that we had to extend their contract another year, unfortunately, but Rapheltis will help us implement the new one, and we'll be done with Encuesta, and it'll be a good good change, and it's going to be a lot better for our residents and our business owners too.
Okay. All right, any questions from committee members? Council? Chris, what's your pleasure on this one?
Consent's fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. Next piece is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts with Jacobs Engineering Group, Inc. for professional consulting services in support of the Fixed Network Advanced Meeting Infrastructure, AMI, project and declaring an emergency. Mr. Little?
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. There again, it's the water meter project, and I failed to mention on the Raftels. Raftels, they assisted Pittsburgh on implementing their system. Jacobs, they are assisting Cleveland. So we interviewed them, we interviewed Cleveland, and we feel like they were the best fit. So Jacobs is going to be helping us in managing the installation, and there's a lot of things that go into where the meter, well, obviously there's only one place the meter goes, but where the wires run when you have finished basements. They help us identify some electrical things that need to be corrected on a safety thing, on jumper wires from the electric meter. So they are basically just helping us manage the installation. And there again, we hope to be done with them probably by August or September of next year.
Okay. All right, any questions from committee members? Council? What's your pleasure, Chris?
Consent's fine.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Last piece, ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts with the Akron Energy Systems LLC, AES, for professional consulting services in support of the Fixed Network Advanced Meeting Infrastructure, AMI project, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. Everybody's familiar with AES. And they have a lot of steam meters out there, and they have employees that are very familiar with the AMI project. So we hired them to help us manage the whole project itself. They've put a couple employees on our, ingraded with our staff. They're not here 40 hours a week, but they are helping us manage this project and pushing everybody to get this done in a timely manner.
Oh, okay. All right, any questions from committee members? Council? Seeing none, what's your pleasure?
Consent's fine.
Consent, can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it. Seeing we have nothing else coming before us, we are adjourned.
Our next committee today is the Public Safety Committee. Those committee members are Kamer, Mosley, Lombardo, Malik, and McKittrick. We do have all committee members present except for Councilman, looks like Councilman Malik is on his way back in. Can we give everyone just a moment here? Thank you. Okay, you do have all committee members present whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Sarah. Yeah, I'd like to call the public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present, and we do need to approve the minutes from our last meeting, please.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
I have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed to the minutes? All right, thank you. Moving forward, we have one old piece on our agenda we're going to discuss today and one new piece. And our old piece, we've been taking time on it for a little while, and it's an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into a contract or contracts with the County of Summit Alcohol, Drug, Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board, other known as ADM, for the purpose of establishing a mobile behavioral health crisis response service, purchase required equipment, and accept reimbursement from ADM for costs, and declare an emergency. And we have with our Deputy Mayor of Public Safety, Clarence Tucker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a pilot program, a one-year pilot program that ADM wants to do with us. We'll have a clinician, a paramedic, as well as one police officer that go out on low acuity calls, the non-emergent calls. with the purpose of reducing the psychiatric calls that Akron Fire and Akron Police respond to and freeing up resources. It's something where this grant that the ADM board is going to be providing for our citizens will provide a vehicle, equipment, uniforms, and actually help with the actual personnel that we send out to actually go on these types of calls. Many times when we respond to go out on psychiatric calls, the options are not great. There are many of those people that don't really fit in. They don't need to go to jail. They don't fit in jail, and there may not be the available resources right there available to help them. So this provides those resources in a format that we think is going to be very successful, and it's been successful across the country.
All right, thank you for that. I appreciate that. Before I take any questions or comments, I want to recognize Chief of Staff Gert Wellms, too, in case she wants to add anything.
Not really. This is a former field that we worked in, I have worked in. We do have relationships with community support services. We do have trained CIT officers. Informally, we are doing a lot of this work. We are looking to put a little more formal process in place going forward. I think everybody here is probably familiar with the QRT program, our quick response team that really got formed during the opiate crisis. And we're really not necessarily stealing that model, but really looking at that model, leaning into it, and seeing what worked, what we could possibly translate into really helping populations with mental health issues as well. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you. I appreciate that. Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to rise in support of this. I'm excited about this. I've been talking about it with many of you for a while, but I really appreciate the focus of safety forces and the administration and putting this together in partnership with ADM and with other entities. As Deputy Mayor Tucker said, there have been a lot of communities across the country that have been setting up these kind of co-responder models over the last few years, and I know they've seen a lot of success, and I hope that this pilot will help us kind of test out how this works within our own context, and then hopefully grow into much more from there. Just want to also just recognize the point that the Chief of Staff made that Akron has been a leader in CIT and in other issues, and I think this is an opportunity for us to continue to innovate and help take the burden off of our safety forces and ensure that we get the best result for every call, or the best result that we can, given all the externalities that face our safety forces when they go out to a call. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Kamer. Quick question for you. Under the mobile crisis unit, will it be like an ambulatory unit that is going out? Will the team travel together when someone is in crisis, or they come in individually? If you could walk me through that.
Actually, part of this grant provides a vehicle that ADM will purchase for us, so we will be going out as a unit.
Oh, okay.
And I also have District Chief Chris Karakis here with me that can also add a little bit of content to this subject.
Yes, thank you. Yes, they will operate as a team. They'll meet in the morning. Their operation hours are like 8:30 to 4:30. They'll meet, they'll go out. Any downtime, they're going to be following up on 988 calls, but they will be responding to low acuity psychiatric calls. The paramedic and the police officer will both be CIT trained as well.
This is awesome. Thank you. Thank you.
Make a motion for approval with suspension of the rules.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. Well, thank you, folks. I appreciate your hard work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Wellms. Now, our new piece, we're going to move into our new piece, ordinance approving certain rules proposed by a City of Akron Citizens Police Oversight Board and declaring an emergency. I do want to let the committee know that I did get a formal request to speak at this meeting from Clay Cozart, the president of the Akron FOP, and their union attorney. And I do see we have a few of our citizen police oversight board members here. So what I would do is, I know there was more than two, but I would encourage just only two of them, if they do need to make any comments or speak, I'll allow them, even though I did not get a request, but, just pertaining to this. All right, moving forward. President Summer?
I do want to just to make this very clear, President Kent Boyd did reach out to me and did ask, okay? So I just for the record, to set that record straight, okay? Thank you.
Okay, come on up. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chairman Kamer, and thank you for the rest of the committee and the council. We, as Citizens Police Oversight Board, believe that the over 30 Akron residents that voted for issue 10, we believe that in best practice, us asserting ourselves as such powers is very important for us to be an effective board. It's taken us this long to really, I think, not only talk about it, but also to do our personal research as a board, reaching out to other Citizens Police Oversight Boards across the country. And the resounding thing that we kept coming back to is our ability as a board to do some parallel investigation as it is going and as it is happening, simply because we want to be effective at what we do. We believe we have that obligation to this city. We believe we have that obligation as well to our police department. So in my presentation, what I want to say as I speak for all of us is this is not meant to be something that we are saying that we are against or we are not aligning with our police department. We believe these rules can actually benefit our police department as we continue to want to build trust, but also transparency, not only within the police department, but our community as a whole.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yep.
Come on up and just state your name if you don't mind. For the record, I appreciate you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. My name is Robert Gippen. I'm a board member and I'm chair of the governance committee. And I want to say, first of all, we very much appreciate the support that we've gotten from the council and the administration, in these months since we were formed. It's not been easy, and we appreciate the support we've gotten. As Chairman Boyd said, we've given a great deal of thought and consideration to the rules that we're now asking for you to approve. And we've had input from many parts of the community and including from the FOP about them. And this was our considered unanimous judgment that these were the proper rules for us to operate. I don't know if, Mr. Chairman, if you've received this, but last week we did approve a document explaining our position. Has that been given to the committee? Yes. President Summer will pass that out. Thank you. And it probably speaks for itself. I don't know whether you've had the opportunity to read it. If you do have questions, about the rules, and particularly the two items that we've called out, one having to do with the scope of our authority, the investigative authority, and the other concerning, as we proposed it, that our procedures would not require approval by the council. I'd be happy to speak to those. One thing that I would, in a way, it revises what's in the statement. We had only been recently made aware that the grievance that had been filed by the FOP concerning the city's use of BCI for the Walker criminal investigation. As we understand, it has been resolved, and resolved in such a way that it would support the city's use of BCI. So assuming that's true, and I'm sure Ms. Herskowitz can speak to that, that if that's the case, then we think that there's even more reason that our rules, as we've proposed them, ought to be approved by you, hopefully with the concurrence, we still hope, with the FOP. But if the actual substitution of BCI for internal investigation is going to be acceptable, we would think that the occasional, and it will be only occasional, the occasional parallel investigation by our board ought likewise to be acceptable. So, we really would appreciate your favorable consideration. We are only trying to do what we think the charter asks us to do. We think this is consistent with national best practice. We've cited some some work from the national organization called NACOL, concerning best practices of such boards, which definitely would support this. So I'd be happy to answer questions and otherwise to ask for your favorable approval.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. I guess we'll take any questions for you folks. Committee members first. Any questions or comments? Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think this question would be for the chair, Mr. Boyd, but I think really kind of in considering this, it would be helpful just to get kind of a brief summary of where the board is in all of its work, including this. That would kind of be helpful in understanding how this fits into the overall process of this board and the timing of this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, where we are currently in our work is we believe, established some working norms for us as a board as far as within our subcommittees, especially within our governance subcommittees when we look at our personal procedures, but also we have also created a review subcommittee where we can review some of the complaints that we have. Along with that is our ability to be able to build out our Office of the Independent Auditor, which we just conducted our first interview. I want to say it was, last Thursday? It was last Thursday. So we have, I believe it's 7 candidates that have applied for it. And we also have an abundance of candidates that has also applied for the deputy auditor. We already have an admin. So we believe that the pace that we're moving, we're really proud of, simply because we feel like we're going to be able to move into some of these directions. Again, the rules that we are proposing is not something we're going to be ready to do tomorrow. However, we feel like we are building, if you will, the right type of system that we're putting in place in order to be able to do that in a really healthy way. And so as we move into 2024, we want to continue to build out and have the Office of the Independent Auditor built out with our auditor, deputy auditor, as well as our admin, so that we can start moving into reviewing a little bit more of some of the complaints that are coming in, but also investigating some of the policies that go along with some of the complaints that we're seeing. So we have, if you will, built some of that structure around being able to investigate policy and some of the rules and the regs of our police department as we receive those complaints. Yep.
Thank you. Kemp, if you could answer a few questions. When you talk about the reviewing of complaints, how many have you all received so far?
Yeah, I would say since we had our first meeting back in April, I would say we received probably a total of anywhere between 15 to 20 complaints so far. And the use of force complaints as well. So we have complaints, we have our use of force complaints. So I would say we're probably within the framework of 15 to 20 of those complaints. Now, mind you, we haven't had an independent auditor since we have, I would say, probably after our first month of meeting. And so because he was ill and was unable to do the job, so we have kind of pitched in a little bit as a board with looking and reviewing some of our complaints, but also it's given us the opportunity to look at workflow, which is good for us because we need to understand and have the experience of how the complaints come in, but also it's been able to give us an opportunity to build relationships within our police department.
So thank you for that statement. And as we talk about the independent auditor, and that position is completely vacated right now? Right now,
yes.
So is that the number one priority, is getting that position filled? Because it seemed like you guys are doing a lot of work without having that secondary person there.
It is. What we've had over the past couple of months is we had contracted the auditor position out. Right now, though, yes, that is our highest priority, is getting somebody in that seat. And we believe once we have somebody for that seat, from the others, we'll be able to recognize a deputy auditor.
Last question. So
Yes.
I'm going to jump back to the first question.
Okay.
So how would a citizen know that they would come to you all with a complaint with there not being an auditor in place?
Yeah.
How would they know that?
Yeah, well, we've also had some community engagement functions where we've allowed them to know that. But also we've given out our webpage as we go around to different ward meetings, but also as we engage in our community engagement. But what we've also done is we have the, if you will, the cell phone that was going around that Mr. Young has, now Mr. Fields has. And by also having our admin, they can call our actual independent auditor's office. And so she is able to take some of those complaints that are coming in, so that way we know that they're there. And then we have a follow-up call that we're doing with those residents that are giving us a complaint. But also talking to the Akron Police Department when those complaints come in. So those complaints are either going to come to us or they go to the Akron Police Department.
Final question, I promise. So when you're having your community engagement meetings, I know you all had one over at Mason, which is in Ward 5, Ward 10, and it was heavily attended, and there were some officers there as well. How are those meetings going for you all across the city, and are they being attended not only by the community, but are the officers being able to engage with the community as well? I know they were at Mason. I'm just trying to get a feel, how is that going across the city?
We feel like across the city, they're being attended really, really well. I think Diane Lewis, who heads and is our chair for our subcommittee, engagement subcommittee, has been doing a really great job of, first of all, getting the word out, but also us having documents to present to our citizens to let them know, here's kind of the process that you can follow when you do file a complaint, and here's the workflow of the complaint. So we did a community engagement over at Robinson CLC. I want to say it was a couple of months ago that was really well attended also. And there were a couple of officers that were there as well.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. This time I would like to invite the union president of FOP, 7 Up, Clay Cozart. And we can hear from you.
Good afternoon, or is it evening? I'm not sure. Chairman Kamer, appreciate this opportunity. Council President Somerville, committee members, and council members. I just want to say a few words before I introduce our union president, Susanna Muskovitz, to explain to you that the FOP is not here to have an adversarial relationship with council or with the Police Oversight Board. That's not our intention. In fact, we invited Chairman Kemp, the Vice Chair, and Mr. Gippen to our lodge for an informal meeting where we discussed many of the same things that Susanna is going to speak to today. And then they were, in turn, they invited us to speak to the entire Oversight Committee meeting, and despite a mischaracterization of that it was threatening, it was not threatening. We're simply laying out our position that we feel is protecting our collective bargaining agreement. And that's all we're doing here. Mr. Kemp mentioned, or Mr. Gippen mentioned BCI. That's a great example of there was some disagreement between the union and the city about BCI investigations. We filed a grievance. We sat down for months with the city, and we worked out those differences. We had hoped by educating the members, educating the chair, the vice chair, and Mr. Gippen out at the lodge, that we could form that same type of situation. But unfortunately, it seems that they're ignoring the advice that you're going to hear from Susanna Muskovitz here in a second. And I can tell you that in the past, when the unions filed a grievance and had to go to arbitration and won that arbitration, the city comes back months later or maybe a year later and then wants to negotiate what they lost in arbitration into the contract. What is the union's motivation for negotiating something that was lost in arbitration? So I think as you look at those rules and as you listen to Susanna, please keep that in mind. We're trying to explain our contract, explain our position, and negotiations come up next fall, hopefully a little early in spring, because it always takes forever. So some of these issues that we disagree on, we can talk about at the negotiating table. But to pass something that we feel violates our collective bargaining agreement with no regard to that, I think hurts the process. So with that, and I will say, I really respect the Police Oversight Board. I really do. They have a huge responsibility. One of these days, they're going to have to go to the community when the police take action and they find out that the police didn't do anything wrong, and they're going to have to tell the citizens that, and then now they're going to start getting complaints and threats and what have you. And so we understand that. We've been dealing with that for many, many years. And so we really respect them and their responsibility to the entire community. And with that, I'm going to introduce Susanna Muskovitz. She's been our union attorney for 25 years. She's from the law firm of Muskovitz and Lemmerbrock. And with that, Susanna. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Clay. As Clay said, my name is Susanna Muskovitz, and I've been representing the FOP in Akron for a long, long time. And I just want to thank members of the Safety Committee for giving the FOP voice and to allowing us to address you on this very important issue. Now, as you know, the Police Oversight Board was created by charter language, and the charter language did two things. It created the board, but it also limited the board. And that's no different than any other, Akron City Charter or the Constitution. It creates the branches of government, but it also limits the branches of government. And one of the key components of Issue 10 that was passed is that it includes checks and balances. And the checks and balances are very important. So just as an example, the members of the board were appointed either by the mayor, which required a 2/3 vote of council, or were appointed directly by council. Actually, no, I think the 2/3 is if they're appointed by council. If they're appointed by the mayor, it's a majority. But I mean, so they're not appointing themselves. And a second one of the very critical checks and balances that occur with the Oversight Board is that they have the ability to promulgate rules, but the rules have to be approved by the city council. And it should not be a rubber stamp. I mean, that is a critical check and balance on what the Oversight Board is doing. And I think what they've been doing is what they want to do is to actually expand their power and to allow themselves to decide who are they, what can they do, and what can they, what can they accomplish. And the way they've drafted these rules is to negate the oversight of city council. So it's our position, it's my opinion, but it's also the FOP's position that the rules that were passed last July violate the language in Issue 10. They also violate the language in the collective bargaining agreement, which is part of that, provision in the charter. So let me just explain a few things. So last spring, you may or may not know that, the law department in the city came out with rules, and they provided sort of a template of rules to the Oversight Board. And the rules that were drafted by the law department were neutral. They just they laid out what can the board do, what can the board not do. But the Oversight Board rejected that, and they wanted to expand the rules and expand their authority and rewrite them. So they created their own version of the rules. Now, Clay told you that he and I were invited to and actually addressed members of the Oversight Board last June, on June 21st, and you can even see the presentation. And we explained why we think the rules violate language in the collective bargaining agreement. But what we also said is that we think that there's a great opportunity for the board to be productive and to really improve police-community relations. But it's actually a balance that they have to accomplish. But we think our words were literally just dismissed when they adopted their own. So let me just give you a couple examples. I know I have limited time. One of the key parts of the charter language is that states that the Oversight Board's authority is to be interpreted and applied in a manner that is consistent with the collective bargaining agreement. And one of the big differences between the version of the rules that the law department drafted and the version of the rules that the oversight board passed last July is whether they can conduct literally parallel investigations. So under the original draft, under the law department's draft, there was actually language that says that the oversight board is not supposed to take any action that would interfere with an active criminal investigation or a disciplinary investigation of alleged misconduct. They cut that language out so that they can do an investigation at exactly the same time, whether it's the police department or BCI or another law enforcement agency is conducting an investigation. We think that will undermine the integrity of the investigation. In fact, the rules that they have passed, if you look at them, they went so far as to say that if the police department or if BCI or if another law enforcement agency asks them not to conduct a parallel investigation, that they will consider it on a case-by-case basis. So even if, say, BCI says, we think your actions are interfering with what we're doing, that is not sufficient. They're going to take their own decision. They're going to make their own decision. And that's in the rules that are in front of you. And I will tell you that the more high profile the action, the higher the public pressure for them to do this. So it's sort of a counter, you know, that's really how it's going to result. Now, under the labor contract, investigations are to be done internally, and there are due process protections that are negotiated and guaranteed and that are critical. And we think those would get thrown out the door. We think that it would actually really compromise the actual investigation themselves. And so under their rules, they become the judge and the jury about whether or not they want to do this. And let me give you an example. The city of Akron has had a police auditor for many, many years. The FOP has negotiated a lot of labor contracts while there's been an auditor. And so what's the relationship then between the auditor, even under the oversight board now, and the police department and the collective bargaining agreement? So this issue was raised a little while ago, and the law department came out and they created two different flow charts about what is the authority of the auditor and what is the authority of the police department with both citizen complaints and also use of force. And if you look at, and I've got copies of the flow charts if you don't have them, they're each one is just one page. But what they do is they don't say that the auditor has to wait until an investigation is completed. The auditor has the authority to become involved in the course of the investigation, to look at what's happening, to provide input, to look at drafts and provide feedback. It is not a situation, even under the present, relationship, where the auditor sits back and waits until something is completed. But it's also not being done in parallel, where you have the auditor and you have the, OPSA, internal review, conducting interviews of the same people that are giving two different versions to two different, entities, a defense attorney's dream. And so when we met with the oversight board, we talked to them, or at least tried to talk to them about we're not saying you have no role in investigations, but we are saying that to actually actively conduct an investigation of a shooting, of a use of force incident, or of a citizen complaint at the same time, looking at the same witnesses that the police department or another law enforcement agency is doing it, does not make any sense, and it actually is bad practice. A second example is just, and this goes hand in hand, is the whole subpoena power. When the law department drafted their rules, and by the way, I have copies of those if you want them, and I don't know if that's been provided to council or not, because it's good to look at the two versions in parallel. But when they provided a copy of their rules, there's actual language that says that the subpoena that they issue cannot be used to interfere with an active or ongoing investigation. And again, they deleted that language. And one thing that's really important to remember, that under the Public Records Act, there's an exception to the release of confidential law enforcement investigatory records. But so that while a criminal investigation is ongoing, and this is true of every police department in Ohio, every law enforcement agency in Ohio, while the investigation is ongoing, the investigatory records are not subject to public records requests. That is not the case with the Civilian Oversight Board. So any person they interview, any piece of paper they obtain, whether it's through their subpoena or through their own actions, is immediately public record. And that again jeopardizes the integrity of these investigations, which are absolutely critical. I don't know if you've looked at the BCI investigation that was conducted in the Walker case. It's 227 pages. They interviewed hundreds of people. So I just want you to think about, none of that is subject to confidentiality while it's ongoing. And so when we look at the rules as drafted, we think what they're trying to do is get council to allow them to really expand their power beyond what issue 2 authorized. Because what issue 2 authorized is an oversight board, not a police disciplinary board. That's the language in it, and that's the language throughout, okay? And so council needs to really look at this committee needs to really look at this carefully, and I think council needs to look at this carefully and not give it a rubber stamp and compare the language that they authorized with the language that was provided to them by the law department, to look at how they're trying to expand their authority, how they're trying to allow themselves to even rewrite their own rules in their rules and not have to go back to city council. And because what it does is it negates the checks and balances that exist in any democratic entity where council is supposed to have the oversight either to select the board members, to look at the rules, and that's not something that the board should take over. So they should not be the judge, jury, and decision maker of who they are and what their authority is. That decision rests with city council. And so we're requesting that you reject the rules, that you send them back to the drawing board, and that you say this does not really honor the language in the charter. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate those comments. Committee members, I saw Councilwoman Mosley's hand up first, Councilman Malik, but it's up to you too if you want to, who wants to go first? All right, Councilwoman Mosley.
If you could get or email us a copy, or council, of the previous language prior to the change.
I have copies.
I would really like to see that.
I have copies of the law department's version. I made 12 copies of the 2 flow charts. And also I wrote a memo to Clay last summer kind of laying out how I think it violates the labor contract. And I'd be happy to share that also.
If you could, I'd appreciate that. I think we all would. I think it would give us some context to look at. We're just getting the memorandum from the Oversight Committee. This is a lot to unpack. So I do hope that we will take time, not saying we should, it's up to you, Chairman, but this is a lot. And I would hate for us to rush it. I absolutely want to see the language. Because some of the things that you brought up concern me, I have to be honest, and I want to see what that looks like, especially when we talk about investigating while there's an open investigation going on. I want to look at that and see what it looks like. If you wouldn't mind giving me those, I'll make sure they get included. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Councilman Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone who's spoken. I don't have any questions for Ms. Muscovitz, so if someone else does, I'll defer to them.
Nope, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
You can go ahead and have a seat for now. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yep. But I want to thank everyone who came down and spoke here today. I particularly want to thank the Oversight Board for a lot of work that they've done over the last more than 6 months. We've all been, I think, on the email notices for the meetings and subcommittee meetings, and there have been a lot of them. And I know that that's a large time commitment and is evidence of how important this work is to each and every one of you. So I really appreciate that. As most everyone knows, I was one of the petitioners for the Issue 10 Charter Amendment, and so I'm somewhat familiar with it. And actually really do agree with the characterization of Ms. Muskovitz and how she presented it, that to me during the process, people would ask, well, do you think this is part of their powers, or do you think this is part of the powers? And some of that involved parallel investigations, and some of that involved subpoena power. And my response was to refer people back to the language about it is the language of the Charter Amendment is to be interpreted in line with the collective bargaining agreement, so as not to conflict with the collective bargaining agreement. I think this is important because what matters in the interpretation of that is not my legal opinion, it's not the FOP's legal opinion, it's not the board's legal opinion, it's the city's legal opinion. And the city's legal opinion is determined by our law department. And so I really do think it's appropriate that as we review these rules, and I'm not asking for that today because I don't want to put Mr. Angeloni or anyone else on the spot, but I do think that this council should request advice from our law department on what the law department's views of this. Sorry, I'm being passed continual documents by Mr. Lombardo. I do think it's appropriate that we request that analysis. I believe, my understanding is that the law department has provided advice to the board during this process under which they've developed the rules. But I hope that we can consider that and make an informed decision. I also just want to kind of spotlight that part of this and part of the reason that language is in there is because these discussions are inevitable. If you go to any oversight board, I really think in the United States of America, there always is a tension as to what could arguably violate the collective bargaining agreement or what might not. And so, in some ways, it's often a issue that is up for debate. I think it's important that we have these conversations and going forward to really come to as much of a consensus as we can. There were points that were made about the role of the auditor prior to the creation of the oversight board. I think a lot of what led to the creation of the board is that the auditor's power was really undefined, and that often it was up for debate whether actions that he was taking might violate the collective bargaining agreement. Sometimes it was implied or suggested that it might. And so really, what is the line if someone is calling APD and saying, I talked to this person, can you talk to them too? Does that constitute a separate investigation, or is that part of APD's investigation? It's not absolutely clear. And so I think conversations like this are really essential in determining actually what the scope of those powers should be. And it is, as I said before, a messy process. I hope that we can get through it as quickly as possible and efficient as possible, but I do hope that we take the time to review that, and particularly to get the law department's guidance on it.
Thank you, Councilman. Councilwoman Amobian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I appreciate you calling on me. I first want to recognize and acknowledge the work of the Oversight Board. I have attended many of their meetings. They're public meetings where they've had citizens, police officers, all in the same room as we've discussed this charter amendment. Everybody trying to understand it and trying to get their arms around it. I, for one, I don't want to take this board's independence away. I mean, that is a critical piece of the work that they need to do. They need to be an independently operating board. And one of the things that we've grappled with and talked about in all the meetings we've been having is, how do we conduct the work that we are asking this board to do? There's been so much about the FOP's contract and the contract with the police officers, but no one has been able to show exactly what the conflict is. And perhaps if the attorney has that information, I, for one, would love to see it, because I have not been able to see where the conflict is that people keep talking about. And a lot of it, I guess, is interpretive. But for one thing, I know that this board has been grappling with where is our power? What is this board is expected to do when we get complaints from citizens and when we are asked to look into a situation where there has been um, use of force, or even a murder or killing or whatever the case may be. So, so for one, I hope we take time for certain, and that we look at what we're talking about, and if someone can clearly spell out where the conflict is, and because there is no sense in having a oversight board if it has no power to do anything. And that has been one of the things that citizens have talked about and we've been grappling with for the longest. Part of the work has to be that independent eyes need to be able to look at the same infractions and come away with whatever interpretation those steps will lead to, but that they should not be impeded from doing that. So I am thankful for the work that this oversight board has done. And I, for one, have attended many, many of their meetings when they've had citizens, police officers all in the room, and everybody's been talking. Um, and I do believe that this oversight board is to provide protection for not only the citizens, but the police officers as well. Because I've always thought that this could be, if we come in with some clear, independent views and find out that there was no infraction, we should come out publicly and say that in support of our officers. I don't think anybody is afraid to do that. And I think that is part of what the job is, to look at these things with clear eyes, independent views, independent process of reviewing it, and then come away with recommendations or ways in which we think this could have been handled. So I know, and I think the people, when they took on this charge as board members, they knew it was going to be difficult. There's no question about that. And I think all of them are committed to doing the best job they can with independence, not with a clear view of finding officers, wrong for doing whatever their work entails, but trying to figure out what actually happened here. And, how do we see this? And what recommendations would we have to bring forth? And again, no one expected it to be easy, but I certainly appreciate all of the individuals coming today and discussing it. I certainly am truly interested in understanding what the overstepping. We keep talking about the bargaining unit agreement, and no one has ever shown me what is in there that prevents this body from doing their work. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Appreciate the comments. Councilman Fusco?
Thank you. I'd like to also applaud the efforts of the Oversight Board and the continuous effort. I know that their time and talent has been probably almost not theirs, especially since it's began. And it's hard for a startup, any kind of a startup, no matter what it is. It's tough. And I believe we do want to make sure that that they're successful in every way. I though did spend time over the weekend looking over the legislation and looking over and been watching some of the meetings and what's been going on. And from the beginning, it was said that this would not violate the contract whatsoever. And that's been the story. It's not going to violate the contract. But I think clearly this afternoon we had heard that this will in fact do that, and even to some extent put put the board, ultimately the city, in jeopardy, especially with, and of great concern would be those, that information that's collected during an investigation that is the ownership of the investigators. But then again, if it would go outside and it's not, and it wouldn't be part of, I don't remember the name of it, but there's a law within the, I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, but the ownership of evidence, and perhaps Mr. McKittrick might know that. But if it's given over to an organization such as this, what'll happen is they're not covered within that state law. Okay, and I think that's what we were hearing back there. And that should be of great concern, I believe. And we are here to look at the balance piece and to empower the oversight board as much as possible, but then again, also to make sure that we don't violate, and the city's finances are, that's part of these decisions that we have to make every Monday. And it's our responsibility too to do that research and homework that we've, that before we vote on things, and make an educated vote on these type of items. So I think it's kind of simple and easy that this is something that we should just ask that the board relook at.
No, thank you. Council President Somerville?
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I too want to thank the board for all of your hard work. I know that this is way more than what you ever anticipated when you decided to sign up. And so I just don't want that to go unnoticed. We thank you for your service and your commitment. But I do have to say, this is no secret. I have shared it with other board members. I cannot support removing council's authority, nor any violation of the collective bargaining agreement. Again, all of us around this horseshoe took an oath to protect the general fund, and that is just our responsibility. So those are two reasons why I cannot support the proposed rules changes before us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam President. Appreciate that. Hold on, Councilwoman Mosley, go ahead.
Just brief. I do want us to take the time to look through the documents from Mrs. Attorney Muskovitz. I want to make sure I say it right. I'm only on page 3, and I'm a reader. And there's nothing in here that says they want to take council's authority, but in Rule 2, it says that it is subject to council's approval.
Yes.
And that's in the new document. In the old document, it didn't say that. In the new document, it does. So, and I'm just starting to read, so I hope we are not making a rush here. We need to look at both of these documents for what they are. There's some things in here that I think we need to look at. There are some things that probably do need to be changed, but it does state that it is subject to council's approval. It does not say that they don't come before council. It specifically says that they have to have council's approval.
Mr. Chairman, if I might.
Does the committee want to hear from Bob? Is it okay? All right, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, I do need to respond on that point. There is absolutely nothing in our proposed rules, nor could it under the charter, that takes away any power from council. I want to be emphatically clear about that. And now we do provide in this that our procedures would not require council approval. But if council wants to send these rules back and say, no, we want to approve your procedures or some of your procedures, that is perfectly fine. But we are not usurping any power from this council, nor could we.
Thank you. Councilman Malik?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I just want to kind of underline the point that I made before, which is that Mr. Gippen is an attorney and he has an opinion about whether this violates the collective bargaining agreement or not. Ms. Muskovitz is an attorney and has an opinion about whether this violates the collective bargaining agreement. I am an attorney. I have an opinion about this, whether this violates the collective bargaining agreement. The same with Mr. Costa. And none of our opinions speak to the city's opinion about whether this violates the collective bargaining agreement. I really do believe the most appropriate thing is not to make a judgment on this until we have our city law department's perspective on whether this violates the collective bargaining agreement. I think that is the most appropriate guidepost. I think that these opinions, I don't mean to be dismissive or silly. I think that the opinions of everyone who I stated before are important, but ultimately the most important opinion, the reason we pay for folks in our law department is to have expert legal advice on these matters when we have people come before us and say this is a violation and it's not a violation. So I would really strongly urge us to rely on that and for us to ask the law department to provide that input.
Thank you, Councilman. Appreciate that. The comments that I have is I don't feel comfortable taking time on this. I would prefer you folks to continue to work together and come to us with something that you agree on. Taking time, putting it in our lap, I don't think it's fair. So moving forward, I'm not comfortable with time, but go ahead.
A couple questions. Number one, are you asking an opinion right now?
No, I would ask us to take time, and I would ask us to ask the law department to share their opinion next week.
All right, thank you. As someone who has been deeply involved with labor relations over my career, I hear what my colleague Councilman Malik saying about different attorneys. Different attorneys practice different types of law. I'm well apprised of Susanna Muscovitz, and she is an absolute expert in labor law. So I do have confidence, and I think that she made it quite apparent what the violations are as far as what it would violate the contract. And it's not just the FOP contract, it's a contract by agreement, a CBA, which means both sides agreed upon this. And I can't vote for something that is going to violate a contract that was agreed upon by both parties. But to go further than that, my concern is, because I was involved with this as well during my career, is that to jeopardize an investigation, to give a parallel investigation where there could be conflicting statements from the same person to two different entities, which creates doubts and could ruin that case. I can't support that as well. And therefore, I'm making a motion for an adverse report. Thank you.
I'd second that.
So we have a motion and a second for an adverse report.
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. Your microphone is off.
Thank you. All right, so I have a motion and a second for an adverse report. So everybody in favor of an adverse report? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed?
Nay.
Sarah, do a roll call.
Sure. Kamer,
Aye.
Mosley,
Nay.
Lombardo,
Aye.
Malik,
Nay.
McKittrick.
Aye.
The motion for an adverse report passes 3-2.
All right, with that, we will present that to council this evening, and nothing else come before us. We are adjourned. Public safety. Thank you.
Our next committee of the day is the Public Utilities and Green Committee. Those committee members are Freeman, McKittrick, Connor, Mosley, and Holland. Can we give everyone just a moment here before we get started? Thank you.
We didn't even do budget yet. We're not even into budget yet.
Nope.
Goodness.
We'll get you one.
Good afternoon. I'd like to call the Public Utilities and Green Committee meeting to order. If I could have a roll call, please.
Freeman.
Here.
McKittrick.
Here.
Connor. Mosley. Here. Holland.
Here.
All committee members are present.
Okay, if I could have a motion to accept the minutes from our previous meeting.
So moved.
All in favor?
Second.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Our first item is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent or their designee without the formality of publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts with Protec Systems to purchase PLC equipment to replace outdated PLC control hardware throughout the water plant that is at the end of its service life and no longer supported, and declaring an emergency. And Mr. Little, first thing I'll ask you is, what is PLC?
Program logic controllers.
Okay, very good. Please proceed.
As the legislation stated, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Sorry about that. The PLCs up at the water plant are outdated. We've had some intermittent failures throughout the last couple of years, so this legislation will allow us to update them all. Allen Bradley is the vendor, and Protec is the local source for us to purchase those. So this will totally upgrade all the program logic controllers throughout the water plant.
Okay, very good. I'll look to any questions or comments from committee members. I do not see anything. Anybody else on in council have any questions? What would be your pleasure, please?
Consent's fine, sir.
Motion for consent.
I have a
Second.
motion and a second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Next, we have an ordinance authorizing the mayor or his designee to enter into sponsorship agreements with project implementers for water resource restoration sponsor program, and to enter into sponsorship agreements with certain project implementers and for the sponsorship of 2 projects under the WRRSP and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. We've brought quite a few of these through your committee in the last few years. This is a sponsorship. We always like to find one of our own to sponsor, but nothing qualified for this year. So what we are going to do in our SSR, which is our sanitary sewer rehabilitation, it's the lining of the sewers, that loan is going to be about $4.5 million. So us sponsoring these 2 programs, one is up at the Grand River up in Paynesville. It's a flooding issue that they have. And then the other one we're going to sponsor with our interest is the Baldwin Creek Lowhead Dam removal, which is up in Berea. So there's 3 lowhead dams on that creek that will be removed, which obviously will increase the habitat of that creek. So the current interest rate is 3.76. Our interest rate will drop to 3.66 by doing this. And over the 45 years, the city will save about $151,000 in interest. So.
Great. Questions or comments?
Consent's fine.
Consent as well?
Motion for consent.
Second.
Second.
All in favor of consent, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, thank you. Finally, we have an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent or their designee to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of publicly advertising for bids with Rexel for the annual preventative maintenance of 2 high-service pump variable frequency drivers at the City of Akron water plant for a 5-year period and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Yes, Rexel, they are the vendor that is certified to work on our VFDs up at the water plant. As you know, we have 6 high-service pumps. This will take care of 2 of them. VFD is variable frequency drive, so when these pumps start, they start at a very low RPM, so that we don't get the water hammer throughout the system. With that being said, these pumps are, I think there's 3 25 horse and 1 15 horse, 2 15s. So they are very high voltage, they're 4160. So it takes specialized equipment. You have to go in there and do extensive cleaning, and they do all the tightening and all the checking of all the connections. So this is a preventative maintenance thing it's not a mandatory thing, but it's best practice to do. And as you know, 4160, you get a little bit of dust and you get arcing between those connections and you could have a real dangerous situation.
It's like a wise move. Any questions or comments? All right.
Consent's fine.
Consent as well?
Motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Okay, finally, Mr. Little, I have a word. Coming towards the end of the year, I don't think we do it by any written decree, but if you could let the folks down at Akron Peninsula Road and the folks out in Kent know that this committee, this council, and I'm sure the citizens of Akron, we talk about a lot of things, we argue about a lot of things. At the end of the day, the water comes on and it goes out the other way then too, and we take that for granted. How would you be able to let them know that?
Oh, I'll pass it on to them.
Okay.
I'll definitely pass it on. But we appreciate everything you guys have done too. I mean, from all the stuff that we've brought forth between service and public utilities, it's staggering in the last 8 years. I think we've brought to you probably close to $750 million. Now, obviously, 2 tunnels is a big portion of that, but all the construction projects and everything we've done at both plants, we want to thank all of you for your support.
Yeah, and I would also say, finally, as a fisherman, I hear glowing reports about what's happening in the Cuyahoga.
Absolutely.
And the life that used to be up here, what we did down on Route 82,
right,
or off of 82, and that's migrating up here. And I look forward to seeing what happens when this whole gorge project.
When the gorge dam comes down, we're going to even see more improvement.
Yeah,
so
and
we're
I've actually heard that from sportsmen before.
Yep.
You can't believe what's happening in the river. So
get your kayak out.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
So thank you very much. If there's nothing else coming before us, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Our final committee of the day is the Budget and Finance Committee. Those committee members are Freeman, Amobian, Malik, Baylor, and Lombardo. We do have all members present whenever you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'd like to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. For the record, we do have all members present. And if I could have a motion to accept the minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
Second.
A motion is second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Thank you very, very much. Our first ordinance, let's see, I didn't go back up to old agenda. Let's see. Okay, going back to a couple items. We have anything else to offer on item 1?
Not from the administration.
Okay, and you've handed out everything that we need regarding this. Any additional information we need?
I don't believe so.
Okay. So what would be your pleasure?
Consent. I just want to be clear what item 1, maybe I'm...
On the old agenda?
Yeah. It's the omnibus. Oh, the omnibus, okay, yeah, we have nothing to add, and consent is fine, yeah.
Okay.
Motion for consent.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 And then, does anyone have anything to offer for item number 2? Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, thank you. Just briefly, I know you all have taken time on this, but I think to get a little more clarity from Ms. Porter, I think is important before there's a vote on it. I did reach out to her last Monday, and I think there may be some confusion about what is really needed and what the money would be for. I know there's something about some training that needed to happen and some equipment that may need to be purchased, but my understanding from the message from her, the bus part is completed. They need funding for other portions of the bus, and it was it wasn't even 40 grand. It was like 30, maybe 34 or 38. My phone is dead, or I would tell you exactly what it is, but I know it was in the 30s. It wasn't 100,000. So I think that we need to probably get some clarity from that board exactly what it is they need the funding for, because my understanding, the bus is already completed.
Okay.
So I think we need to reach out to her to get some clarity from her.
Okay.
That's just my
No, thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other comments? Yes, Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For clarification, that's incorrect. The money that's requested is for the bus. To complete the construction of the bus is $68,000. The remaining was the 32, which was for operating. We're going on a month. Well, we started this discussion in September, so 2+ months. Plenty of time for folks to reach out. Ms. Porter has sent several emails stating and clarifying that. The 68 is for completion of the bus. 32,000 will be used. They have to hire people. What would be called not capital expense, but an operating expense. So the 68 is for completion of the bus. The 32, which would bring it to 100, is for operating expenses. Hiring of 2 persons that can help man the bus.
So, Mike, I'll correct that if I'm incorrect in my assessment. Councilman McKittrick did tell me he and Councilman Fusco did meet with her. I think that she might want to put that in a context in an email for us to speak to what that looks like financially, because I think there's different conversations and of what is really needed, and seeing that Councilman McKittrick and Councilman Fusco is agreeing the numbers that Councilman Neal gave is what she told them as well. So I think we need to get some clarity on exactly what is needed and what needs to be funded, because I was told something differently. So I think we need to get some correct information. And if I'm incorrect, then I apologize for that, but that's not what I thought I heard.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. McKittrick, would you like to?
I'm not on the committee, Mr. Malik.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you have some?
Well, no, what I was going to do was ask if Mr. McKittrick might be interested in sharing his perspective. So we got there anyway.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yes, indeed. Councilman Neal is correct. We had a meeting and met with them to try to get some clarification, and the numbers that Mr. Neal did express is exactly what she expressed to us. She said that's what they would need, but they would be happy if they could even get less. But is what's needed to complete the bus, and it is indeed not finished. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anything to add, Mr. Fusco? Okay. Mr. McKittrick did a good job. Okay. All right, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I just want to say thank you for those who had a concern, Mr. McKittrick and Mr. Fusco, for reaching out. There we have it. For them to finish this bus, to be able to minister to the community, the 68 to complete the bus, 32 for operating. We've identified a funding source. I would appreciate it if the council would move on this today. If there's a concern with that funding source, an alternative funding source has been brought to this council as well. But either way, funding this initiative so that they can complete the bus, because the longer we continue to delay, the longer it's going to take them to get this bus on the road and to be able to minister to the least of these in our community. So I appreciate, if council would consider the length of time they've taken on this, all the information that has been shared, and the opportunity for members of council to do just like Councilman McKittrick and Councilman Fusco, to reach out to Ms. Porter, to Mr. Ford, to Dr. Brown, and get information. They've provided us more information than was even necessary for this request. Now it's time for council to join the rest of the community to support this great cause so that they can get things underway.
Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to everyone for this continued discussion. We've discussed this, for a number of weeks. I think that, in my mind, we all passed a resolution that expressed support for funding this organization and funding the shower bus. I do think it's appropriate for us to fund the bus itself and try to get that complete. I do think that asking to fund for additional operating expenses, I think is a lot at this time, especially when you look at $100,000 is, I think, 30 to 40% of the organization's annual budget. I shared that last week. I shared that the week before, I believe, as well. I don't think also that we have a funding source that a majority of council agrees on, because several council members expressed last week their interest in, as council leadership shared, moving forward with this camera program. So I do believe it's appropriate for us to find money for this bus. I think that we should do that in the capital budget process. But I don't believe we have a funding source. I think the alternative funding source that has been suggested by the sponsor is not a funding source, because that money is being spent currently on a salaried employee. And so I guess that's where I stand today. I appreciate everyone engaging on this point. I think that we do have actually more consensus on this than it appears. But I don't think that we have a funding source here today. And I think that we should work on doing that as part of the capital budget process.
Yes.
As we talk about funding sources, if we could look, we had raised between 25 and 30 grand for the Peace for Peace, and we never did it. I don't know where the money is. I don't know who has it.
I'm sorry,
it was called Peace for Peace. The mayor passed a resolution for it. I was on the resolution with him. We were supposed to do a gun buyback, and we never did. And we had all these different agencies donate money. And to this day, I have no idea where that money is. Maybe we need to look and see where that money is. That could be a funding source, because it was collected. I don't know if Crime Stoppers was holding it. I know we got money from both hospitals. We got money from the county, and even the city put in money, but nothing ever happened. It never went forward. So if we could look and find out where that money went, maybe that could be a source.
We will look to see where that money was collected.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neal? I'm sorry, Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to make it clear that if council does choose to use the 172 for ring cameras, which if council votes that way, they have the right, could put 72 to one, 100 to the other, and then pull money out of the capital budget to do more ring cameras, because it's going to take time. We haven't even done the assessment on the effectiveness of this. But I want to make it clear, especially, Councilman Malik, Councilwoman Holland, you're both attorneys, members that have been on this council for years, and any member, we are held accountable to uphold the city's charter. Let me be clear. The funding source, the budget amount that was set aside for chief of staff, if it's not there, we're in violation of our charter. It's my understanding, based on my conversation with the finance department and the law department, that the chief of staff was covered by the administration, and that's fine. But understand section, I believe it's 31 of our city's charter. The only way a position can be created in council and funded is by 2/3 vote of this council. If not, if we've set that money aside in the budget and then spent it without fulfilling that part, we are in violation of the charter. So that being said, if we choose to say we're going to take that whole 72 and like we're going to spend the whole 172,000 before the end of December on ring cameras and force them to wait on this bus, then we can go to the money that was set aside for the chief of staff because we never voted on it. It doesn't say we take the money from that position. It's obvious that it's still being funded from the administration, because I'm sure the administration wouldn't want us to violate the charter either. Because as sworn in elected officials, we are sworn to uphold this city's charter. So I just want to make it clear, if the council chooses not to take part of the $172,000 that's there to assist with the operating expenses, the capital expense of the bus, and hopefully even the operating expense so they can get it done, then there is another funding source.
Thank you. Mr. Malik.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that the sponsor has repeatedly, made reference to this violation of the charter. And so I would just ask the law department if the representative from the law department just could weigh in on that question.
Yeah, I can briefly weigh in. Obviously, any opinion I would give in detail would be subject to attorney-client privilege, so I won't go into too great a detail, but I can represent to you that the law department's opinion on this is that the chief of staff position was created completely legally, and it was funded appropriately. And that information has been conveyed to Councilman Neal very, very, very clearly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Holland.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe that the law department just mostly answered my question, but if Mr. Fricker is available to just confirm that in fact the funding for the position in question does come from an administration department, not necessary to go into detail, but just for the record. Thank you.
So the position is funded out of the general fund budget. Both council and the mayor's office receive their funding from the general fund. So it's really irrelevant whether it was funded out of the mayor's administration budget or the council budget, as it's coming from the same funding source. So I look at that as kind of a moot point. It was funded out of the general fund.
Okay, thank you.
Understood. I think that helps clarify. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll take Mr. Neal's comment and then we'll kind of wrap this up. Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, the money is allocated in council's budget. Council's budget. So if the money's in council's budget, all of our money comes from the general fund. We're one city, but it's allocated in council's budget. It should still be in council's budget unless it's been moved. Let's not, folks, people who understand the city's charter understand that it reads as such: 2/3 vote by council to create a position. And so, as has been asked, it's coming out the administration, that's fine. But when we approved the budget, we set aside that money under council's budget. So if council has not voted by 2/3 vote to expense those dollars, then they should still be there for council to redistribute. Because we know in another couple of weeks, everything goes back to the general fund.
Ms. Somerville.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. And just to be clear, we keep hearing about the charter. The charter speaks to classified positions. The chief of staff position is unclassified. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. I'd like to add one other thing as well. As everyone knows, council appropriates the budget for the city. In 2021, we passed an appropriation amendment that funded the position within the council budget. In 2022, the position was funded within the council budget. Every member of council was provided with a listing of all of the personnel that were funded by that budget. That exact same thing happened in 23. So council has voted for 3 separate appropriations funding this position in the council budget.
Thank you, Mr. Fricker. Mr. Malik?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to make a motion for a time so that we can continue to work on finding an appropriate funding source for this cause.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of time, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, we'll refer this item. Thank you. And we have nothing else to come before us. We are.
Excuse me, Mr.
Oh,
Chair.
I'm sorry,
we have-
Mr. Neal, please.
Yes, sir. I'd just like, if the law department, we could do this in a general section, read section 31. It's not about classified positions, it's about creating positions, no matter classified or unclassified, in regards to charter, in regards to council, for council specifically. Read the charter. And in regards to approving, it was in the midst of those approvals that when questioned by the Beacon Journal reporter, that the mayor stated that he was paying for this out of his budget because we had not passed this per the charter. So I think it'd be good, again, this evening, read section 31 so everyone can understand what that part of the charter means and how it applies to council. And in regards to, I'll forward the article where the mayor specifically said, when questioned about if council had taken a proper process, he said it doesn't concern because he's paying for this out of his budget.
All right, I beg your pardon. We'd taken quite a while on this, and I thought we were through, but we have some new items to cover, so.
We actually have 7 pieces of legislation.
Nice try, though.
Sorry, Steve. All right, new items. We have an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase of materials and services needed by the various divisions and departments of the city for a period of time not to exceed 5 years, approving the specifications thereof, and declaring an emergency. Mr. Wheeler.
Thank you. This is our first of 4 bid ordinances. This is truly our bid ordinance for items that we bid out on a yearly basis for citywide functions. It's our version of streamlining a little of the processes. With us here, we have Luba Kramer, who is our purchasing agent, and if you want to say something about it, by all means.
Sure. This year,
Yeah, your mic, please. Thank you.
Thank you. This year, we've really done our due diligence in looking at these ordinances that we present on an annual basis. And to Mike's point, we're really trying to streamline these ordinances. So for instance, on this list, we have taken a look at it and we've sort of combined some of them to really be more succinct. And we've worked with all of the departments, asked for their input, and we are hoping that this makes a much more streamlined process and much more of a user-friendly, and hoping that we can really expedite some of the processes that we have.
Okay, thank you. Questions or comments? Pleasure in this?
Consent.
Place this item on the consent agenda. All in, I need a motion.
So move.
Second.
And a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. Councilwoman Mosley, you're not on this committee.
Oh, listen, I've been here so long today, I'm confusing everybody.
I think we're all a little bit. Could I have someone on that committee?
I thought that was the case. I moved.
I told Ms. Mosley, we're even because I did that on one of her committees one time.
I'll make the motion for consent.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion for consent, and there was a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, very good. Next, we have an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into an agreement or agreements without the formality of advertising for bids with Amazon, Granger, and WB Mason for the purchase of miscellaneous supplies and small dollar purchases used by various divisions and departments of the city for a period of 1 year, authorizing payment therefore and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is what we call our ordinance for our punch-out catalogs. It allows our users to go into our Workday financial system and procure items directly. It reduces staff and administrative time, and it allows the purchase orders to be directly issued to the vendors on this ordinance. So with that, if any questions, happy to answer.
Questions or comments? Please.
I'm not on this committee, so
That's
I raise
all
my
right.
hand now. So question on the the items that you're purchasing from Amazon. Give me an idea what that list looks like.
It can be just about anything. Truly, for the most part, it's small office items that we couldn't get off of, like WB Mason, for example. We do have some thresholds in place, and every item still goes through an approval process, beginning with the department and ending up in our purchasing division.
Okay, so when we go to order our Ring cameras, that'll be something totally separate, or will it be built into one of these? It'll be totally separate?
I believe we are looking at doing it as a separate piece of legislation.
Okay, all right, thank you.
So it wouldn't help you if we form a paper and pencils committee and you could, okay. All right, consent okay?
Consent.
Okay.
Motion for consent.
Second.
All in favor of consent, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're on number 4, correct?
Number 3, Mr. Chair.
Oops, I'm sorry. Ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into an agreement or agreements without the formality of advertising for bids for the purchase of miscellaneous supplies, service, repair parts, and labor for machinery and equipment used by various divisions and departments for the city for a period of 1 year, authorizing payment therefore, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is our annual no bid ordinance. I'm going to defer to Ms. Kramer here in a second, but we, after kind of taking a step back and looking at our process, have really streamlined this as well. It's truly for goods and services where the practicality for going out to bid is not practical. A lot of this is sole source, or we don't really have any alternative to get these items. So, Leba?
So as I mentioned, we really looked at this this year, and we really wanted to be mindful of what is on this ordinance. What we found in the past was there were a lot of items that we actually either did bid, and it was still on this ordinance. So we were really trying to hone in on presenting information that really covers what we do on a daily basis. We oftentimes are asked what these ordinances mean, and we're really trying to have it represent that this no bid ordinance is something that cannot be bid out for it being a sole source or other uniquenesses around that.
Very good. Wishes of
consent.
Mr. Malik.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to everyone who's here. I definitely appreciate the thoughtfulness on, making sure this is as narrowly tailored as possible. Did want to ask about one of them, Lock 3, the Gordon Food Service. Is there a reason why that couldn't be bid out?
Yes, so a lot of those food services, in order for us to bid it out, we would have to have a complete list of the items that they would want to be purchasing on a regular basis. So oftentimes, it would be more, they utilize these foods on a, lack of a better say, they may not have like a planning or a schedule that we could actually go out for a sealed bid. And oftentimes they might actually even go there in person to pick it up, or they might even have the service deliver. So that is why that we could not bid that out.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Good question. Okay. Consent?
Yes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, very good. Next, we will be reading in item number 4. This is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts without the formality of advertising for bids for the purchase of annual subscriptions and maintenance packages for the software currently used by various departments of the city through December 31st, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. This is our final piece of our ordinances here for the bid and no bids, and this is just allowing us to renew services for existing software packages.
Very good. I'm just curious, because I know how many, so this covers every department in the city.
Right, so it covers, various software packages. There's multiple items. Every department has its own unique software service.
So would this cover like the huge HR software that we use?
Workday.
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so Workday, NeoGov, our Office 365.
Okay.
Our city tax software, all of the main, all of our cloud-based package, even some of the client server packages we have remaining.
I started to say PeopleSoft and PeopleSoft. Yes,
And they typically all have, you know, annual maintenance contracts, so, you know, it's kind of a given that we're going to renew those every year, unless, in some cases, unless we choose to look for new software, in which case we would bring ordinances authorizing us to buy new software. This is strictly for the renewals of the software that we are happy with and are using year to year.
Okay, very good. Questions, comments?
Motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 All right, very good. Finally, item number 5 here, an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance or his designee without the formality of advertising for bids to enter into an agreement or agreements with systems and software for support and maintenance of billing software for the Utilities Business Office in 2024 and declaring an emergency.
So this one is actually exempt from the previous ordinance because it's for a one-year renewal with our Enquesta software. This is a piece of software that we are going to be utilizing, as mentioned in public service earlier today, for one more year as we continue work on the implementation of the new customer information system, SPRY, which with Raftelis, we're looking at launching sometime late next year at this point.
So do we have necessity see a change next year once all the meters are in? Or-
Yes, I do think it's going to be more customer facing, and it's going to be very user friendly, both not only internally, but it will have web portal access for our citizens and our customers. And I do think it's going to be, you know, really bringing our billing for our utilities up to the 21st century.
That's fantastic. So the next administration is going to have a lot less to mess with then. So. Any questions or comments?
I make a motion for consent.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, very good. Next is an ordinance authorizing employee cost of living adjustments through calendar year 2024 to employees in the non-bargaining management and unclassified job classes in order to attract and retain qualified employees while at the same time economically utilizing taxpayer dollars to provide vital quality services to the citizens of the city of Akron and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is our 2024 cost of living adjustment for non-bargaining employees. So if council remembers last year, we brought a 3-year agreement for the ASME bargaining unit that covered 23, 24, and 25. And then we brought a separate piece for non-bargaining that was simply a 1-year agreement. So for the past 2 years, non-bargaining has had single 1-year agreements regarding cost of living adjustments. So this will allow non-bargaining employees to get a 3% cost of living adjustment that's the same as the final year of the police and fire contracts that end next year.
And with COLA, we've always pretty much matched, haven't we?
We used to. I would say that in the past few years, there's been some separation, especially since we've started staggering the contracts a little bit, where ASME is now on a different 3-year cycle than police, fire, and CSPA.
Okay. Questions or comments? Mr. Malik?
How was this handled previously before the last 2 years?
So what we used to do is we would, because we were on the same, the contracts were not staggered. So typically we would negotiate with all 4 bargaining units at the same time. If there was a situation where multiple bargaining units had reached an agreement prior to the start of the new year, we would bring all of those together, and typically they were all the same. The COLAs matched across the different bargaining units. We would also add non-bargaining to those, so everyone would get the same at the same time. But to your question, we've now, there is a little bit of separation, as well as the contracts are not all on the same cycle. So non-bargaining now, just I think to maintain maximum flexibility for budgeting purposes, non-bargaining has had 1-year agreements for the last two years.
Thank you.
If there are no other questions or comments, do I have a motion for
Consent is fine. yeah.
consent?
Motion for consent.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, please let it be known by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. And finally, item number 7. This is an ordinance, amending ordinance 75-2023, passed March 27th, 2023, which established the annual appropriation for the current expenses, other expenditures, and the capital outlays of the city of Akron for the fiscal year ending December 31st, 2023, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you. This year, we typically in the past have done 2 budget amendments. This year, we are looking at doing 1. With us today, we have Teresa Klein, our audit and budget supervisor, who's going to hand out the memos. And with that, take some time to look at it, and we're happy to answer any questions.
For those of us joining online, this was also emailed.
Yes, this was distributed earlier today.
And on this piece, we're simply asking for time, not for consent.
Just in the interests of today's time and also time for us to be able to review this memo and then ask some questions maybe by email, I would suggest that I would make a motion for time.
Did you email this out as well?
Yes.
I thought okay.
Same thing.
Yeah, it's the same one.
Yeah, same thing. I'll
Second.
second that.
Okay, we had a motion, a second for time. All in favor, let it be known by saying aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
All right. Thank you very much.
That is the final committee meeting of the day. Council will meet at 7 p.m. tonight. Thank you.